What if Ned Stark looked his king in the eye in the quiet heart of Winterfell and said no? Not at the end of a war, not on the steps of the Sept of Baelor with a sword above his neck, not in a capital of red stone and dead secrets. Here, in the Godswood, where the heart tree watches with its bleeding eyes, where winter is always waiting in the air, where oaths sound different because the old gods do not forget. Robert's offer hangs between them like breath in the cold. Hand of the king, protector of the realm. Come south, old friend. Come drown in wine and memory. In the true story, Ned says yes. He leaves his home, leaves his children, walks into the lion's den, and never walks out. In the true story, this is the first step toward his death. But what if, this time, he does not move? What if the man who has always bent his neck to duty chooses once to stand still? What if the quiet, dutiful Lord of Winterfell lifts his eyes to the man he followed through fire and blood, hears that booming, half-broken voice, and answers with a single word that unravels a realm? No. The word is soft. It lands like snow on old stone, like ash on an old wound. Robert laughs at first, because how could Ned refuse him? How could the North stay home when the king calls? But Ned's face does not change. He has always had that face, carved and still, as if the winter winds had shaped him from the same rock as his walls. What if the North does stay home? What if the king rides south with his Lannister queen and her golden kin, insulted, his pride bleeding under his furs? What if Cersei's eyes narrow in the courtyard, already counting the ways a refusal can be turned into treason? What if, in that moment, the war that never truly ended opens again in their minds? The sack of King's Landing, the dead Targaryen children, the Prince Ned killed, and the Princess Robert crushed in his rage. Ned feels all of it pressing on his shoulders. The weight of Robert's crown, the weight of Lyanna's memory, the weight of a promise made in blood in a tower no one speaks of. Oaths to a king, oaths to a sister, oaths to a wife and children who know, in the way children know things they were never told, that the South eats Starks alive. What if, instead of choosing the Iron Throne's demands, he chooses the red leaves and the weeping face in the bark? What if he chooses Robb's uncertain voice, Sansa's songs, Arya's wild defiance, Bran's climbing hands on cold stone? What if the secret he carries like a wound, about a dead prince, a stolen girl, a child whose blood could burn this kingdom, stays in the North with him instead of walking into the spider's web of King's Landing? This is what happens when one quiet no echoes louder than 1,000 war horns. This is that story. The story of a man who turns his back on a king, and of a kingdom that cannot bear to be refused. Premise declared, a realm without Ned in King's Landing. So we step back from the feast firelight and the sound of Robert's laughter, and we fix this moment in the snow. Ned Stark refuses. The king rides south without his old friend, and the story we know fractures like thin ice under a heavy boot. This is not a small change. This is a new road. This is an alternate history, a deliberate wound cut into the tapestry of both book and show, anchored in one quiet word spoken in the Godswood. Ned does not go to King's Landing. He does not wear the hand's pin. He does not walk into the viper's nest to die for a secret he barely understands. Everything that followed from that journey, the investigation, the beheading, the war, begins to unspool. What happens when you pull Ned Stark out of the capital and leave the Lannisters alone with the throne? In this telling, his identity shifts. He is not the doomed hand, not the honorable fool wandering through red corridors of lies. He is what the old songs called him first, Warden of the North, a man of stone and winter who chooses stillness over glory, distance over proximity to power. He stays where the dead are buried under his feet, where the gods' wood knows his voice, where the wind is clean and the snow remembers. He has always belonged more to the north than to the court, but now he lives that truth instead of betraying it for a friend's request. There is a paradox at the heart of that choice. Here is the man who helped make a king on the Trident, who rode through blood and smoke to break a dynasty, now turning away from that same king when asked to rule beside him. A lord who came from war and chooses peace, knowing peace may not choose him. Does Robert forgive the refusal? Or does each mile south make the insult burn hotter? Does Ned's loyalty look like love, or like quiet defiance? The North itself steps forward as a character. Semi-autonomous, proud, remembered as the kingdom that once stood alone against dragons, and now suddenly suspect in the eyes of the Iron Throne. A Stark says no in front of half the court. Ravens fly. In Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister hears of it and measures the risk. In the Red Keep, Cersei tastes the insult and imagines a realm where the next hand is hers to control. Without a Stark watchdog in King's Landing, what does unchecked Lannister power look like? This is what happens when the realm begins to see Winterfell not as a loyal bannerman, but as a cold, distant power that might remember being a kingdom. The old alliance between Stag and Direwolf becomes a question instead of an answer. Jon Arryn's dead. The Baratheon succession is a secret rot, and now the one man who might have cared enough to dig for the truth stays in the snow. Who uncovers Joffrey's parentage if Ned never walks the Red Halls? Or does that secret die with Jon Arryn, leaving a different war, or something worse, to come? The tone of this world is quieter, more haunted, less about battles, more about consequences, less about swords ringing in the capital, more about how the silence in Winterfell's courtyard can echo all the way to the Red Keep, unsettling men who have never seen snow. He does not know why, but when Ned Stark chooses the north, the White Walkers beyond the wall have already begun to move. In the next part, we follow that echo, south to a king who feels rejected, and north to a bastard who feels the ground shifting beneath his feet. This is that story. Episode card, Winterfell. The King's Visit, 298, AC, dusk, 3:12. 3:12. On screen, the world tightens. 3:15, 3:15. A black card, cold as carved ice. Winterfell, Great Keep, 298, AC, dusk, 3:21. 3:21. The same words the show might use. The same moment. Already bent. 3:27. 3:27. Outside that card, Winterfell breathes. The feasting has begun. Meat spits over open flame, fat hisses and spits into the fire, and smoke curls up to lose itself in the dark ribs of the rafters. The hall is loud, but under the noise there is a quiet tension, a second voice beneath the laughter that only men like Ned Stark and Tywin Lannister would hear. Robert drinks. Of course he drinks. He has always drowned insult and memory in the same cup. 3:49, 3:49. The Lannisters watch. They always watch. Cersei's green eyes move like knives over stone, from Ned at the high table to Catelyn's careful courtesy, to the Stark banners that hang like dead wolves in the firelight. Jaime leans back with that lazy, golden slouch, but his hand never strays far from the hilt at his hip. Tyrion drinks and listens, because he knows that in a hall like this, secrets are louder than songs. This is what happens when the lion walks into the winter and realizes the snow does not bow. 4:17. 4:17. The North is curious, wary. Men from the mountain clans stare at Lannister crimson as if it were fresh blood on the snow. Old retainers remember the rebellion, remember Rhaegar dead on the Trident, remember a Targaryen prince and a northern girl whose names are not spoken at table. They do not know why their hands tighten on their cups when the king laughs too hard, but they feel it in the way children know things they were never told. 4:41. 4:41. Around them, winter presses at the walls. Dusk in the north is not gentle. It falls like a cloak of lead. Torches gutter in sconces, smoke-stained and trembling. Furs weigh heavy on shoulders, turning every movement slow, deliberate, as if the whole castle were moving through a dream of snow and dead kings. The stone underfoot is cold, even through boots, a reminder that whatever warmth the feast creates is borrowed, fragile, ready to be taken back. 5:06. 5:06. The Stark children feel it first. Robb glances between his father and the king, reading distance where there should be brotherhood. Sansa watches Cersei with that bright, hungry gaze, and something in her perfect queen shivers, just for a heartbeat. Arya fidgets, fingers stained with gravy and restlessness, sensing a wound in the room she cannot name. Even Bran, high above in the gallery, feels the air pull tight, as if the castle itself is holding its breath. What is it they are all hearing beneath the music? What is it they are all waiting for? 5:39. 5:39. Robert drinks harder. Each cup is a shield. Each joke a blade turned inward. He does not know why Ned's quiet tonight cuts deeper than any word, only that the man he came north to claim has stayed just out of reach all day, like a shadow in the godswood. The insult is not spoken yet, but he feels it forming, heavy as winter, inevitable as dead leaves. 6:02. 6:02. We follow him when he rises. Down the narrow stone corridor, away from the roar of the hall, torches throwing long, unsteady ghosts along the walls. His boots echo. His breath is loud. The air cools with every step, as if he were walking into the heart of the north itself. At the end of the passage waits a heavy door, iron-banded, familiar to us from another telling. 6:24. 6:24. On the other side, in the private chamber where he once offered Ned Stark the realm, the king will ask again. The same question, the same throne. But this time, a different answer waits in the dark. 6:38. 6:38. What happens to a kingdom when the last honest man says no? We open that door next. Scene reframed. The offer, the silence, the refusal. The heavy door closes behind them with a dull, stone-thick sound. The noise of the yard, the barking of hounds, the clang of practiced steel, all fall away. It is only two men now, a table, a fire, a crown. Robert Baratheon lowers himself into the chair with a groan. Lord Eddard, he says, and the title sounds wrong in his mouth, too formal, too far. You helped me win the Iron Throne. Now help me keep the damn thing. His voice is rough with wine and years. I'm surrounded by flatterers and fools, Ned. Vipers. I need you there. I need you down south. He drinks. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. 7 hells. I hate it, he mutters. All of it. The councils, the petitions, the ledgers. Paper. Always paper. Jon Arryn did it all. He was a father to us both. And now he's dead. The word hangs between them like smoke. They say it was a sickness. I do not believe it. Ned hears Jon Arryn's name, and the room tilts. For a heartbeat, he is young again, standing in the vale with frost in his beard and airy wind in his bones, listening to the man who taught him what honor meant in a world that had already killed his father and his brother. Jon Arryn is dead. Lyanna is dead. So many dead, and all their ghosts seem to lean in when the king speaks. He has always smelled the south as blood and roses. A bed of blood. Lyanna's fingers clawing at his wrist, her voice a cracked whisper. Promise me, Ned. The heat of the Tower of Joy, the red of Rhaegar's rubies bursting like drops of winter berries in the river. He does not know why the fire in this chamber feels like that same heat, but it does. The same wound opening. Robert leans forward. "I will make you Hand of the King." The words are the same as in the tale we know. The plea is the same. "You're the only one I trust. I will have your answer." How many lives turn on to those sentences in one telling of the story? How many wars? In this telling, Ned does not answer. Not yet. Silence settles, thick as wool. The fire pops once, a sharp report that makes Robert glance over his shoulder, impatient. The crown on the table between them, heavy gold and dead stag, seems to watch as well. Ned feels the north at his back like a wall of ice and stone and faces. Catelyn's quiet, careful eyes. Robb's open, eager pride. Sansa's songs. Arya's wildness. Bran climbing where he should not. Jon in the yard, blade in hand, carrying a secret in his blood, in the way children know things they were never told. Duty to the king. Duty to his children. Which weighs more? If he goes, he leaves them in a castle that will empty itself of honor the moment the southern banners ride away. If he refuses, he insults the Iron Throne, leaves Robert alone with lions who smile with their teeth. He knows what Tywin Lannister does when he thinks he's been shamed. He knows what the South does to Stark honor. This is what happens when every path leads through a wound. Robert's gaze grows tight. "Say something, Ned." Ned Stark looks at the crown, then at the man who wears it. The quiet is a living thing now, pressing against his ribs. "No," he says. One word. Simple. Unadorned. Final. Robert's mouth actually falls open. For a heartbeat, he is not a king, not a rebel, not the man who shattered a prince's breastplate with a war hammer. He is only a friend who has been refused. Then the hurt hardens into something else, and the air in the room changes. We leave it there, with that single word hanging like a drawn blade, and Robert Baratheon's first wounded anger just beginning to rise. Shockwaves in the solar. Robert, Cersei, and the insult to the crown. The silence in the solar does not break. It splinters. Robert's breath comes rough, like a man who has taken a blow he did not see. He is still staring at Ned, at the quiet Winterfell stone behind him, at the dead wolf banners that do not bend. A king has been refused. Not in a council chamber, not in the Red Keep, where shadows can swallow an insult, but here, in the cold north, face to face. What does a man like Robert do with that wound? At first, he reaches for the old armor. Laughter. A jape. He has always used noise to bury pain. His voice booms that Ned is a stubborn old goat, that the wine is weak, that the north has frozen his friend's balls. But the words fall flat. He hears it himself. He hears the edge under his own tongue. Because this is not just a friend saying no. This is what happens when the Iron Throne is told it is not enough. Robert feels it as an insult not only to his crown, but to the war that bought it. Did he not bleed on the trident? Did their brothers not die so that his word would mean something? If Ned Stark can refuse him in his own hall, who else might think they can stand tall when the king commands? The question sits in his chest like a stone. It does not move. When Cersei hears, it reaches her as a whisper first. A handmaid, a Lannister guard, the quiet tremor that runs through a host when the king has been shamed. She knows before anyone says the words. She knows in the way children know things they were never told. Ned Stark refused. There is a flash of cold satisfaction. The wolf will not be in King's Landing. No northern eyes at the small council table. No old friend to pull Robert back from her, from Joffrey, from the golden noose her father has wrapped around the Iron Throne. But under the satisfaction, something harder twists. A refusal to her husband is a refusal to her house, to her father, to Lannister blood. How will the realm read this? That the king can ride a month north and be sent away like a merchant with a bad offer? That a lord of the north can humiliate the Baratheon crown and suffer no fire for it? Jaime hears it leaning in some shadowed passage, armor bright, eyes amused. A Stark hand would have been a shield between lion and king. Without that shield, the path is clearer. Fewer northern scruples, fewer quiet questions about debts and dead hands, and how Jon Arryn truly died. Yet a defiant north is not a tame thing. Even Jaime knows that. A wolf that refuses the leash may bare its teeth next. And somewhere far to the south, Cersei imagines her father's face as the raven is read aloud. Lord Tywin Lannister, who burned a city for less than a slight to his name. Lord Tywin, who has always answered insult with annihilation. What will he make of a northern lord who dares to shame his king, his grandchildren, his legacy? She can almost hear his voice in her head. Cold, measuring. A northern rebellion cannot be allowed to even dream. The king's visit was meant to be a reunion. Old wounds healed over wine, old ghosts laid to rest in the crypts. Instead, it curdles in a single refusal, in a single quiet word that turns friendship into a question mark, and the road south into a threat. If this is how the north answers the crown in peace, what happens when the snows deepen? When ravens start to speak of other dead things moving in the dark? And when Robert rides away from Winterfell with his pride bruised and his throne insulted, who exactly will he bring closer to his side to make sure it never happens again? Winterfell holds its breath. Ned, Catelyn, and the cost of saying no. Winterfell feels quieter after the king leaves the hall. Not peaceful. Not truly. The air is thick, like the pause between lightning and the crack of thunder that everyone knows is coming. Ned walks the familiar corridors as if they are unfamiliar. Stone he has always trusted feels heavier under his boots. Servants flatten themselves to the walls, eyes down, sensing something wrong, in the way children know things they were never told. He does not know why his hands are shaking, until he reaches the door to Catelyn's chambers, and finds he cannot lift the latch at once. Inside, the room is warm. A fire, the smell of wool and herbs, the soft rustle of winter cloaks being folded. Catelyn turns before he speaks. She has always read him too well. The question is already in her eyes. Did you say yes? Did you leave us again? He sits not beside her at first, but across from her, as if distance will make the words easier. It does not, he tells her quietly. He refused the handship. He looked Robert in the eye and said, no. The explanation is simple. The North needs its lord. His children need their father. Jon Arryn's dead body in the capital is warning enough. But simple words do not make a simple future. Relief comes first. It shows in the way her shoulders drop, in the breath she did not know she was holding. The last time Ned went south for a king, he came back with a stranger's baby and a silence that never lifted. The last time her father died, her sister broke, the realm drowned in blood. The thought of that wound opening again has haunted every quiet night since Robert's letter arrived. But dread follows, faster, sharper, because she also knows what it means to refuse a Baratheon crowned by Lannister gold. The realm does not forget that kind of insult. Men like Tywin Lannister never forgive it. What happens when the lions whisper in the king's ear about northern pride, about old rebellions that never truly died? What happens when Cersei decides Winterfell is a problem to be solved, not a friend to be visited? Ned speaks of duty, of stone and snow, and the long winter that must one day come. This is what happens when a man tries to choose his battles, to keep his blood and his secrets far from southern poison. He tells himself that staying is strength, that honor is not measured by how close one stands to a throne, but by how well one guards one's own hall. Yet even as he says it, another truth presses at him. Has he protected his life and his children? Or has he let the realm think him craven, disloyal, small? In King's Landing, they will tell this story their way. A northern lord, too proud or too frightened to serve. Honor lived one way in the quiet of Winterfell, and judged another way in the songs. Catelyn hears that unspoken fear in his voice. She thinks of ravens flying south, of maesters repeating the tale in cold stone towers. She thinks of Robb, of Sansa's bright southern dreams, of Bran racing along the walls, of Jon standing alone in the yard, like a shadow that does not belong to any of them. If war comes because of this, no. What will she tell them? Outside, Winterfell stands as it has stood for thousands of years. Walls of grey stone, towers crusted with old snow, hot springs steaming in the dead air, a fortress at the edge of the world, far from the Red Keep's whispers and the Lannisters' gold. It feels distant from southern storms. It only feels that way. Somewhere beyond the neck, a king rides away with wounded pride. Somewhere beyond even that, on black wings and cold winds, the first thunder of those storms is already rolling toward the north. Hooked on consequences. If Ned stays, does the war ever start? It only feels that way. Because if Ned Stark never rides south, if he looks a tired king in the eye and says no beneath Winterfell's grey sky, what happens to those storms? Do they break in a single screaming night of war, or do they roll in slow and quiet, a long winter of Lannister gold seeping into every crack of the realm? This is what happens when you pull one stone from a wall that has always looked solid. In the story we know, the chain is clean, almost cruel in its simplicity. Ned follows Robert to King's Landing. He digs into Jon Arryn's death. He finds the truth in black hair and golden lies. Arrest, dungeon, headsman's sword, Robb's banners rising like a red and grey answer in the north. One father's honor becomes a son's rebellion. One dead wolf becomes 5 kings. But if he stays, if the hand's badge never touches northern wool, if his quiet, stubborn voice never walks those red corridors, that chain does not break. It never forges in the first place. Jon Arryn's secret about Joffrey's blood dies with him, or lingers as a rumor no one honest is close enough to chase. There is no Stark lord in the capital to name the children bastards. There is no public fall from grace to light the north on fire. So does the war ever start? Or does something worse happen? Something slower? Something that feels like peace until it is already too late? A realm without open rebellion, but ruled by a boy king whose very claim is a lie, held up by a family that has always answered insult with fire and blood. Removing Ned from King's Landing might save his life. It might keep his head on his shoulders, his bones in the crypt where they belong. But what does it cost to save one Stark? Without him, there is no honest watchdog in the Viper's Nest, no northern lord who still believes the law is more than a game. How far can Cersei move the pieces when no one like Ned is there to say, in that hard northern way, no? Who wears the hand's pin instead? Robert still needs a counterweight to his queen's family. Does he choke down his pride and call Tywin back, handing the realm to the very man who broke it once already? Does he reach for Jaime, the Kingslayer, as hand, a quiet insult that Tywin will never forgive? Or does some other southern lord rise, more pliable, more grateful, less bound by old oaths and winter words? Each choice tips the throne a different way. Each choice redraws the lines around Winterfell, around the Eyrie, around the wall, where dead things are waking in the snow. This is that story. The story where one refusal in the north becomes a map of altered destinies, stretching from the black cells of the Red Keep to the frozen woods beyond the end of the world. And we will follow it, through King's Landing without Ned Stark, through a north that feels safe and is not, through cold forests where another secret is walking on two legs, in the way children know things they were never told. Bran at the edge. A boy, a tower, and a fate delayed. Bran climbs because he cannot bear the ground. When the hall feels too loud, when the talk of kings and hands and refusals presses against his small ribs, when even the godswood seems too quiet, he goes to the walls. He has always gone to the walls, higher than the yard, higher than the ramparts, higher than the places where adults think their secrets are safe. He does not know why the height soothes him, only that it does, in the way children know things they were never told. The royal visit is different now. It is shorter, sharper. Robert's laughter dies quicker in the cold air. Cersei's smiles are thinner, her green eyes measuring stone and snow as if both have insulted her. Ned's refusal hangs over every meal like a storm that has not yet broken. This is what happens when a Stark says no to a king in his own hall. In canon, the days stretch. Feasts, hunts, idle hours where a boy might wander, might climb, might find a broken tower at the wrong moment. Here, the rhythm is broken. Perhaps Robert, stung and drunk, demands they leave at once. Perhaps Cersei, her pride a fresh wound, insists they cut the visit short before more northern eyes can watch her seethe. Does that change when Bran reaches the tower? One branch. They leave sooner, but not that night. The adults argue in low voices behind heavy doors. The king rages, the queen plots. Jaime stands watch, golden and bored. Bran, restless, seeks a higher vantage earlier than he did before. He moves like a shadow along familiar handholds, fingers numb on cold stone, and comes to the broken tower while the Lannister twins are still careless, still certain no one is watching. He sees. He falls. The song is the same, but the timing is different. Who hears the scream this time? Who reaches him first? What does a furious Robert do if a northern boy lies broken at his feet while the Lannisters pack their trunks? Another branch. The insult is too raw. Cersei is cautious now. Jaime stays from the tower, or they choose some other hidden place of stone and dark. The royal party is always moving, always watched, always ready to depart. Bran climbs, but finds only empty windows and dead dust. No golden hair, no tangle of limbs, no shove. In that world, Bran comes down again. His legs still work, his back is unbroken. The secret of Cersei's children sleeps on in the dark, unexposed. Its poison saved for later. Bran remains a boy who loves to climb. Not a boy bound to a chair. Not a boy called to ravens and roots and the dead memories of winter. He stays longer in the simple wound of childhood, and the path to the three-eyed raven bends away, delayed or lost. But what does the world lose when Bran keeps his feet? What does it gain when the Lannisters keep their secret? At the edge of this moment, they are preparing to leave. The yard is busy, tense, full of horses and wheels and unsaid words. Bran stands on a high ledge of Winterfell, one hand flat against the cold stone, watching the royal party beneath a cloud that is not yet a war, not yet a rebellion, not yet the long night. He feels the pull of the tower at his back, the call of the open air before him. He does not know which way he will turn. This is that story, and the next choice he makes will decide who falls and who does not. Cersei's quiet fury. Calculations in the guest chambers. Cersei is not on the ramparts. Cersei is behind a closed door. The guest chambers in Winterfell are warm by northern standards, but to her they feel carved from old ice, from older stone. The fire spits and mutters. The walls drink the heat and give nothing back. She listens to the muffled sounds of departure outside, the clatter of hooves, the shouted orders, the dead weight of a king's wounded pride, and she smiles without mirth. So the wolf said no, Jaime says. He leans against the window embrasure, white cloak bright against the grey, as if he were a torch in a crypt. Robert's still red as a boar's ass. Northern stubbornness, Cersei answers, voice quiet, almost bored. He has always wrapped his honour around him like fur. It will not save him from winter. She lets the word hang, cold and heavy. Then softer. But a man who will deny a king, openly, in his own hall, that is not a wound you ignore. She turns the refusal over in her mind, the way a maester turns a coin, feeling its weight, testing its bite. No Stark hand. No long-faced lord prowling the Red Keep, asking dead questions about Jon Arryn, about bastards, about blood. No honourable fool with a straight back and clear eyes to stand between her and Robert's weakness. Is that not a gift? Without Ned in King's Landing, who will follow Jon Arryn's trail? Who will look at Joffrey's golden hair and see a secret written there? Who will remember that Baratheon seed is black, always black? This is what happens when a king is insulted in public. Everyone looks at the blow, and no one looks at the cracks already in the throne. There's an advantage, she says. Robert will choose another hand, someone grateful, someone who knows his place, someone from our circle, someone father can reach. She does not say the names out loud, Tywin, Kevin, even Jaime himself, but she feels them move like pieces on a board only she can see. Jaime snorts. Or he rides back to King's Landing, drinks himself blind, and lets the realm run itself into the sea. He won't, she replies. Not after this. He has been made small in front of the North. He will need to prove he is still a king. To them, to the realm, to himself. A humiliated Robert is a dangerous Robert. He could lash out at Winterfell. He could drag the North closer, or push it away until it remembers how to stand alone. What if the boy talks? Jaime's voice cuts across her thoughts. Pattern broken. The little climber. Bran. He climbs. He falls. He listens at doors. What if he hears something he should not? She looks at him, then, really looks, and sees the rest of the question in his eyes. What if he hears us? What if he hears about Joffrey? What if he hears about that tower in the west? About the bed we shared while the realm bled? Then we make certain he does not speak, Jaime says. Too easily. Too fast. The North is far from the capital. Fewer eyes. Fewer tongues. He has always reached for the sword before the word. She knows this. She uses this. Not yet, Cersei murmurs. The king is wounded. The North is watching. Father will be watching. He will see insult and opportunity both. If we spill Stark blood now, he will not be the only one thinking of rebellion. She moves to the window, stands beside Jaime, looks down at the yard, where Robert's banners stir in the pale light. A stag, a lion, a direwolf, all snapping in the same thin wind. How long can that last? Without a Stark hand, the capital will be hers to shape, but only if she chooses the hand that wears the chain. We go south, she says at last. We pour wine in Robert's cup. We whisper in his ear. We give him a hand who will bow to him, and to us. She does not know which name the king will seize on. Tywin, to frighten the realm. Jaime, to flatter his own legend. Some lesser man, to flatter his vanity. But she knows the direction. She knows the pressure points. This is that story. Cersei leaves Winterfell with a decision already hardening behind her eyes. The next hand of the king will not belong to the wolves. And in King's Landing, the game will begin again, without a Stark to slow its teeth. Southbound, without a Stark, who becomes Hand of the King. Robert Baratheon rides south without a wolf at his side. The wound is quiet, but it is there. A dead space where Ned Stark should be. Who fills it? Robert needs a shield he can pretend is a sword. He needs someone to count the coins he spends like water, to hold the ledgers while he holds his cups, to stand between his crown and the golden claws already closing around it. He needs a man who will shoulder the weight he will not touch, and still laugh at his jests, still turn his face away from the whores and the wine. He needs a hand who will let him stay a king in name and a boy in practice. Who answers that call? On parchment, the answer is simple. Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, the man who rebuilt a near-ruined house into a stone colossus that casts a shadow across the realm. He has always been the king that other kings feared to offend. He knows how to make accounts balance, how to make lords fall quiet, how to make enemies dead or obedient. The crown already drinks from Lannister gold. Every feast and tourney is poured from Casterly Rock's deep, glittering veins. In truth, Tywin is already the banker of the Iron Throne. Hand of the King is only a title to match the power he holds. Would Robert choose him? He remembers Tywin's cold eyes at court, remembers being a young lordling under Aerys, while Tywin ruled in all but name. He remembers the sack of King's Landing, the dead children, the lion banners over burning stone. Part of him flinches. Part of him hungers for that competence. This is what happens when a man who hates ruling is offered the chance to give it away a second time. Does he refuse the one man who can keep his realm from collapsing under its own debt? There are other names. Renly, young and bright, with a smile like summer. Robert likes him, trusts him, but also sees the boy who plays at power, not the man who holds it. Stannis, grim as winter, would count every coin and close every brothel, and Robert would feel his brother's disapproval like a lash. Jaime, Cersei's dream, would turn the Hand's office into a stage for his legend. Robert is not blind. He knows, in the way children know things they were never told, that making the Queen's twin his hand would be placing the realm in her hands. So the road narrows. Tywin is the choice that offends his pride and soothes his fear. Cersei's voice, quiet and relentless, presses on the bruise. Do you want stability or another rebellion? Do you want our gold or our silence? If Tywin comes to King's Landing as Hand now, he does not arrive as a reluctant old man dragged south by war. He arrives early, strong, with coffers full and patience thin. The crown's debts cease to be a distant thunder and become a noose. Every decision bends toward Lannister interest. Marriages, wardships, royal appointments, the slow replacement of Robert's few loyalists with lion men whose first oath is to Casterly Rock. The collapse that, in canon, creeps like rot through the beams of the Red Keep begins as open surgery. Tywin cuts away waste. He starves Robert's old allies of coin, tightens the noose around the Reach and the Riverlands, lets the north drift into proud isolation, while the center hardens into gold and red. What happens when the Hand's seal is feared more than the king's crown? What happens when every raven that matters flies first to a lion? By the time whispers about bastards and bloodlines begin to stir, the game's board is already tilted. There is no Stark in the capital to ask the wrong questions. No northern conscience to slow the descent. We move now to King's Landing. Interior, Red Keep, Hand's Tower, day. The lion banner hangs from the Hand's balcony, bright against the pale stone, already flying higher than it ever did in the world we know. King's Landing. The Red Keep, 298 AC, a lion for a hand. The lion banner does not just hang. It claims. It bleeds red and gold over pale stone that once felt neutral, almost dead in its indifference. Now the Hand's Tower looks less like an office and more like an occupied fortress. Episode card, King's Landing. The Red Keep, 298 AC day. Heat presses against the walls. The air has a quiet weight, thick with the smell of the river and the rot beneath it, with the faint tang of forge smoke from the armorers hammering out new lion-headed helms. This is what happens when the king reaches for northern honor and finds only refusal. The empty space where a wolf should stand does not stay empty for long. Tywin Lannister takes the Tower of the Hand the way he took Castamere. Not with song, with presence, with numbers, with the slow, methodical replacement of every neutral banner and nameless guard with crimson cloaks and golden lions. He has always understood that power is a language of sigils and steel long before it becomes a matter of law. In the canon you remember, his colours will not flood this tower until much later, after fire and war. Here they arrive early. They arrive unopposed. The lion over the hand's balcony flies almost as high as the stag above the throne. Almost. Is that an accident? Is anything with Tywin Lannister an accident? In the yards below, small folk watch the red cloaks drill. They whisper in the way children know things they were never told. The king is ruled by lions now, they say. The Hand is the true king, they say. Robert drinks. The lions count. Whose justice will answer if a gold cloak beats a man in the street? Whose voice will matter when winter feels far away and Lannister coin oils every hinge? Inside the Red Keep, courtiers feel the shift like a change in weather. Men who once wore stag brooches quietly change them for lions. Minor lords who built their lives on Jon Arryn's patient favor rehearse new speeches about Lannister loyalty. They practice smiles in polished steel, weighing each word like a coin. Who can afford to be seen grieving the old order when the new one watches from every archway? Varys glides through the corridors, listening. Little birds bring him tales of fresh gold in the city watch, of Lannister captains promoted, of a hand who asks for numbers, not songs. He does not know why, but the absence of northern names in his reports feels like a missing piece on the board, a quiet wound. No Winterfell envoys, no Stark bannermen, no hard-eyed northerner in plain wool to say no. Littlefinger counts a different way. He counts debts. He counts how many favors now run through Lannister hands, how many hungry southern houses jostle beneath that red and gold shadow. With no Stark honor to slow the slide, the climb grows steeper, but also richer. What is corruption, after all, but opportunity spoken in a softer voice? There are no grey direwolves in these halls, no bundled northern cloaks shedding snowmelt on the stone. Only reach silks, stormland tempers, and lion guards at every turning. The viper's nest that was always King's Landing does not vanish. It molts. It shows its colours. Here, the snakes coil beneath red and gold, and there is no wolf to bare its teeth. So when the first true test comes, when a secret about royal blood and false heirs edges toward the light, it will come to a capital already claimed, already tilted, already dangerous in a quieter, colder way. Who will speak then when the lions are listening? And who, in all this heat and rot, will remember the dead promise of a Stark who stayed in the north? The secret that dies sooner. Jon Arryn, Joffrey, and a buried truth. In King's Landing, the dead do not speak for long. Jon Arryn's death is still the first tremor. A quiet collapse in a tower of stone. A faithful hand, who has always been there, suddenly gone. He dies with a name on his lips, and a sentence half-formed. The seed is strong. In one world, those words fall into Ned Stark's ears like a warning bell. In this world, they fall into silence. The trail he leaves behind is the same. The heavy book of lineages, the visits to brothels that do not fit the upright lord of the Eyrie, the strange attention to black-haired bastards of a wandering king. The pattern is there, written in ink and in blood. But who now will see it? Who will sit in that same tower, turn those same pages, and feel the same cold hand close around his throat? Not a Stark, not a man who still hears a dead sister's voice in every lie. Robert, insulted in Winterfell, does what wounded kings do. He turns to those who flatter instead of those who question. Tywin Lannister as Hand. Or another lion, red and gold and patient. This is what happens when the realm's chief curiosity is placed in the hands of a family built on secrets. The investigation does not simply stall, it is strangled. Servants who remember Jon Arryn's last days find themselves rewarded for forgetfulness. Maesters misplace letters. A brothel keeper with a good memory discovers that memory is dangerous when lions prowl. Questions become a kind of treason. Silence becomes a kind of coin. Does anyone still look too closely at Joffrey's face? At the way his hair gleams like beaten gold instead of dull Baratheon black? Someone does. Stannis Baratheon is not blind, only exiled by temperament. From Dragonstone he watches, he counts, he remembers Jon Arryn's muttered concerns. He knows, in the way children know things they were never told, that something is wrong at the heart of the capital. But who listens to Stannis when Tywin holds the king's ear? A brother on a bleak island is easy to dismiss. Too rigid, too unloved, too far. When his letters come, if they come at all, they meet a wall of Lannister stone, a hand who files them away, a small council that nods, smiles, and does nothing. Here is the pattern interrupt. There is no public confrontation in the throne room, no torn page handed to a northern lord, no sudden shattering accusation. There is only drift, time, complacency. So what happens when Robert dies on a hunt that no one dares to call suspicious? What happens when a boy with his mother's face and his uncle's temper takes the Iron Throne with every septon in the city calling it rightful? In this version of the tale, there is no outcry. No northern banners raised in the name of a truth about bastard hair and royal seed. The secret that once cost Ned Stark his head never quite reaches the light. It curdles underground instead, a dead thing beneath the Red Keep. And in killing the man who might have spoken, the realm may have killed its last quiet chance to doubt the boy who will one day be king. This is that story. Back in the north, a Winterfell that never sends its lord away. Back in the north, the quiet comes first. Not peace. Not yet. Just the sound of hooves fading down the King's Road, the banners shrinking to coloured threads against the trees, the last echo of Robert's laughter dying against ancient stone. The stable's smell of sweat and mud and something burned. Empty stalls gape where royal horses stood. A lad drops a saddle, and the thud is too loud, too sharp, like a door slamming on a future that will not be. Winterfell has dodged a storm in the south. Everyone knows that. But what rides toward them now, unseen, unspoken? In the great hall, the benches are still close as they were for the feast. The rushes are fresh, the torches bright, yet there is a thin unease in the air, a tension that clings like smoke. Catelyn watches Ned at the high table as he reads the last of the king's letters, his face carved in quiet lines. He has always carried his duties like a weight, but tonight the weight is different. He does not know why, or he tells himself he does not. He resumes the old rhythms. Dawn in the yard. Words with Roderick over the garrison, with Maester Luwin over ravens and rumours. Yet each familiar task is edged now. Patrols are lengthened. Stores are counted twice. The ravens from the south are opened with a care that feels almost like fear. This is what happens when a man refuses a king and remains in the cold. He watches the world that cast him aside, and the world watches back. Robb feels it before he understands it, in the way children know things they were never told. His father's voice in the training yard is harder, more precise. Not just again, but again, and this time think. Not just how to swing a sword, but how to read a line of spears, how to measure a river crossing, how to count men as if each were a coin of blood. Robb is not thrust into command by sudden disaster. He grows into it, day by deliberate day, under eyes that have seen a rebellion and remember every dead face. Sansa's world narrows and deepens. No southern court, no golden prince with a lion's smile. Her songs are still full of gallant knights, but the names are northern now. Manderley, Umber, Karstark. She listens at her father's elbow as envoys come and go, learning the cadence of oaths, the weight of words like fealty and winter. Does she ever wonder what might have been in King's Landing? Of course, but the wondering is a private wound, not a noose. Arya rages against walls that never change. No water dancer from Bravos. No streets of Flea Bottom to vanish into. Instead, there is the Godswood, the practice yard, the wild paths beyond the broken tower. Ned does not break her. He cannot. He has always been too gentle for that. But he gives her a wooden blade, and then a real one, and rules that feel less like chains and more like a map. You may run, he tells her without saying it, but you will know what you are running toward. At night, when the castle sleeps, Winterfell feels more whole than it did in years. No daughters in a viper's nest, no lord in a southern maze. The family is intact. The hearth is full. Yet beneath the warm hall, the hot springs sigh through ancient stone, and the weirwood stands alone in the snow, and the north curls inward like a fist. Sheltered, strong, and more than ever, bound to a fate that may soon belong to the north alone. If the south is lost to lions and lies, who will stand when winter finally comes? This is that story. The north remembers and reconsiders lords, oaths, and isolation. So what happens when the north, already curling inward like a fist, is asked to bare its throat to the south and refuses? What happens when that refusal is quiet, courteous, wrapped in oaths and old friendship, but still a refusal to bend? The ravens go first, then the men. Lord Umber, from the last hearth, all booming voice and wild beard. Lord Karstark, pale and grave as winter itself. Sir Wyman Manderley, huge and soft-voiced, his rings bright as small shields on his fingers. They come to Winterfell under grey skies and watching walls, and the castle seems to know. The stones feel heavier. The air feels tight. They gather in the great hall beneath the dead eyes of the dire wolf banners. The king is gone. The Lannisters are gone. Only Starks now, and those who have always followed them. Jon watches from the shadows near a pillar of carved stone, not quite part of it, not quite a part. He does not know why Ned has allowed him to stay. Only that his uncle's hand had rested on his shoulder a heartbeat longer than usual when the doors were barred. The talk begins careful. It always does. Umber snorts that if a king wants obedience, he should come with more than lions and wine. Karstark warns of royal wrath, of Tywin Lannister's memory, of what happens when proud men feel mocked before the realm. Manderley speaks of ships and trade and southern coin, of how easily a harbour can be strangled without a single sword drawn. Every word is measured. Every voice keeps circling the same wound. Ned Stark said no. Ned listens, quiet as the gods would snow. When he speaks, the hall stills. He names Robert his brother, still in all but blood. He says he has not broken faith, only chosen a different way to serve. The north is strong when the north is whole. Who will guard its long coasts, its long winters, if its lord is lost in a viper's nest of secrets and debts? Is it disloyalty to keep faith with the people who bled for that crown? He has always spoken like this, plain as cold water. Yet there is something else beneath it now. A low current Jon can feel more than hear. Ned reminds them the Starks once wore crowns of their own. King in the North was not a shout on a battlefield then, but a title held for thousands of years before Dragonfire. The North bent the knee to Aegon, not to every lion that sits his chair. Where is the line between sworn vassal and wronged ally? When a king forgets the difference, what does a lord remember? The lords shift. Some eyes are bright, almost hungry at the thought of a north that stands near alone again. A quiet kingdom in all but name behind its rivers and snow. Others look to the doors, already hearing the tramp of Lannister boots that has not yet come. This is what happens when loyalty and distance share the same table. In the end, they pledge themselves to Winterfell. For now. Their words are true, but their silences feel truer. Jon hears the shape of it in the way Manderley pauses before saying, "Your Grace," to no one, in the way Umber laughs too loud at the mention of dragons long dead, in the way Karstark's fingers drum a slow, restless beat, as if counting unseen enemies. When the hall empties, the castle feels changed. The oaths have held, yet something has slipped, quiet as meltwater under river ice. Jon knows it, in the way children know things they were never told. The North will stand. But when the first raven from King's Landing finally comes, whose side of the wall will Winterfell truly be on? Pattern break. No south, new wounds. Jon Snow's different exile. The raven from King's Landing does not bring a summons. It brings distance. Polite words, cool phrases, the weight of a crown that has decided to look elsewhere for a hand. Jon hears the Maester read it in the Solar. He hears Robert's name, Cersei's titles, the Iron Throne set between Winterfell and the rest of the realm like another wall of stone, and dead kings. He's not mentioned. Bastards rarely are. In the days that follow, the castle shifts. Not with departure, but with something stranger, with staying. The royal party rides south without a Stark lord in its midst, and the courtyards feel both quieter and more dangerous, as if the North has declared itself, while pretending it has done nothing at all. In canon, Jon's path is simple. The hall grows colder, Catelyn's gaze sharper, Ned's departure a clean cut that makes the watch feel like escape. Here, the cut does not come. Here, Ned remains at the high table. His voice still fills the great hall. His presence makes the wall feel less like a refuge and more like a sentence he would choose for himself. This is what happens when the father stays and the son still wants to leave. Jon has always thought of the Night's Watch as a way to become something other than Snow. A black cloak instead of a bastard's name. Oaths instead of questions. But now, every time he imagines the wall, he also imagines Ned in this same chair, in this same hall, looking at the place where Jon used to sit. When he finally speaks to Ned about it, it is not on the road south. It is in the Godswood, with the heart tree watching. The air is wet and cold, the way northern air is when winter is only waiting. Jon's words come out too fast. Service, honor, no sons, no wives, a clean life. Ned listens. He says little at first, then more. The watch is not an escape, he tells Jon, but a burden. A life of cold and shadow? Yes, but also of dead hopes and necessary men. Men who had nowhere else to go. Men who had everywhere else to go and chose the wall anyway. Which is he? Which does he wish to be? Jon does not know why the questions land like blows. He has other options now. A place at Ned's council table. A role in a North that is quietly pulling away from the South. Even more than that, a secret name that hums beneath his skin when he is alone. Aegon. Targaryen. Blood meant for thrones, not for ruined castles of ice. He asks once more about his mother. Ned's face closes like a gate in winter. The same refusal. The same wound. Lyanna's name never spoken. Rhaegar's never allowed. The truth still buried, even as danger from the south grows, and Jon's choice looms. Is Ned more wary now, with ravens from King's Landing speaking of Lannister hands and southern plots? Does he look at Jon and see a boy safer in black, out of reach of golden lions? Or does he look at Robb, at Bran, at the empty place where his sister should have stood, and refuse to lose another child to a cold wall at the end of the world? He does not command. He does not forbid. That, somehow, is worse. One night, Jon climbs the outer ramparts of Winterfell and stands atop the walls. The stone is slick beneath his fingers, the wind a quiet knife against his face. To the north, the sky is hard and pale, the line of the world rising toward a wall he has never seen but feels, always, like a distant, waiting judgment. To the south, darkness, soft and unknowable, where kings and lions move pieces he cannot name. He knows he can ride north, take the black, vanish into duty and dead men's oaths. He knows he can stay, become Lord Stark's right hand in a north that may soon stand alone. Both paths are open. Both are prisons. Whichever road he walks, he will walk it without answers, without his mother's face, without his true name spoken aloud. He closes his eyes on Winterfell's wind, and for a moment he is standing on two walls at once, the one beneath his feet, and the one far to the north, waiting. Hooked on the wall, a night's watch without a king's bastard. He stands on two walls at once. But what if he never reaches the higher one? What if the boy who has always dreamed of black cloaks and clean severances from his bastard's life never takes that road when he is meant to? In canon, the choice feels simple. An insult from Lady Catelyn, a dead king's friend at the gate, a royal procession that makes Winterfell's stone feel smaller, narrower, more suffocating. Jon looks north and sees escape. That is what everyone remembers. But in this story, Ned Stark has already refused the king. The south has already turned from promise to threat. Does Jon still walk to the wall when the realm itself feels like a wound about to open? If he leaves at the same time, the wall gains a boy who knows he is a secret, who has traced his true name in the frost of his window at night. He would arrive at Castle Black with the memory of Robert's insult fresh, with the knowledge that the Iron Throne is not some distant dead thing, but a living danger to his blood. Does that make him more obedient to Jeor Mormont's quiet authority, or less willing to kneel to any crown at all? If he goes later, everything shifts by inches that become miles. The first ranging beyond the wall, the tension with Sir Alliser, the desperate ride to warn the south. When the dead man's hand falls on the table in the Lord Commander's solar, is Jon there to see it, to feel that cold truth settle in his bones? Or is he still in Winterfell's yard, his sword whispering against a practiced dummy while the true winter gathers unseen? And if he never goes? If Ned, fearing southern eyes, keeps his Targaryen nephew close, or sends him east instead, into exile or associate anonymity, then Castle Black loses more than a single sword. It loses the boy who rallies the watch against the mutineers, who stands on the fist of the first men, who looks into Mance Rayder's face and chooses mercy over hatred. Without him, who parley with the wildlings when the real enemy comes? Who believes the first reports of blue eyes in the dark? This is what happens when one life is pulled off its track. The wall is already in decline. Old men, empty cells, rotted gates. Jon's leadership in canon is not a cure, but it is a slowing of the rot. Without his voice, the quarrels between Thorne and Janos Slynt deepen. The wildlings are not welcomed through the gate, but left to die in the snow, or pressed harder into Mance's desperate war. Fewer men on the wall, fewer eyes on the forest, more dead things walking. Does another Stark stand there instead? Benjen, if he lives long enough? Robb, if the North's war burns out early and leaves him half a king with nowhere to rule? Or does no Stark ever take the black, and the ancient pact between Winterfell and the Wall becomes only words in a Maester's book, dead and thin? He does not know why, but when Jon looks north from Winterfell's battlements now, he feels not freedom, but obligation, a pull in his blood, a place that is his and not his, in the way children know things they were never told. This is that story. We will return to the wall, to the blue eyes in the forest, and the horn that is not blown in time. For now, the threat waits beyond the frame, quiet and patient, while the south and the north twist themselves into new shapes that will either face the coming winter or fall before it ever truly arrives. Tywin's long shadow. The lion tightens. His grip on the surface, it looks like calm. The war drums are quiet, the banners furled, the streets of King's Landing humming with the same tired trade. But beneath the red stone and the gold, something shifts. The north has turned inward. The south closes ranks. And in the capital, a different hand takes the king's side. Tywin Lannister does not ride into the city as a supplicant. He rides as if returning to a house he has always owned. The small folk watch the lion banners pass and whisper of old sackings, of dead Targaryens, and doors broken by fire. Robert laughs, claps his old enemy on the shoulder, and thinks he has bought stability with an insult to Winterfell. He does not see the way Tywin's eyes measure the throne room. Weighed, priced, claimed. The changes begin quietly. A clerk dismissed here, a master of coin replaced there, a dead-eyed Westerman installed where a reachman once kept the ledgers. Decrees that once wandered through half a dozen hands now pass through one. His. Petitions are delayed unless they carry a Lannister seal or a whispered recommendation from Cersei. Is it violence if no swords are drawn, if the only blades are quills and tallies scratched on parchment? The crown's debts, already a wound, become a chain. Gold flows from Casterly Rock in measured rivers, each loan rolled into the next, until no man can say where the first promise ended and the last began. This is what happens when a king who hates counting leaves the counting to a man who loves the weight of obligation. Every feast Robert demands, every tourney he insists upon, is quietly added to a column under the same name. Debtor. 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 Robert hunts. He drinks. He rages at the council table when they dare to mention the numbers, then storms off to find a boar or a barrel. The realm barely notices. The machinery of rule does not stop when the king slams the door. It simply turns without him, guided by a colder hand. Tywin's voice is low, measured, almost quiet, yet it is the one the scribes now heed. The king is present in the way a storm is present, loud, dangerous, but passing. The hand is winter, patient, inevitable. Varys watches from the shadows of the Red Keep, his soft shoes whispering over stone. He knows what it means when one house holds the throne, the purse, and the swords that guard both. His little birds bring him ledgers instead of love letters, numbers instead of names. He does not know why it troubles him more. Perhaps because gold can kill as cleanly as steel, and more slowly. Littlefinger feels the walls close. The purse strings he once plucked like a harp are held tight in a lion's fist. There are fewer gaps, fewer forgotten corners in the accounts where a clever man might hide a secret. He smiles. Of course he smiles, but the smile does not reach his eyes. How do you climb when the ladder has been mortared into the hand's own tower? On the surface, the Iron Throne has never seemed more secure. No open feud with the North. No open break between king and queen. The ships sail. The roads are patrolled. The gold cloaks are paid on time with Lannister coin. Yet beneath that gilded order, the foundation's hollow. Every debt is a tunnel. Every secret Varys hoards, every quiet resentment Peter nurses, is another hidden crack. In the way children know things they were never told, the city knows it too. That this peace is thin. That this calm is brittle. That one hard blow, in the right place, at the right moment, will not just shake the throne. It will bring the whole Red Hill down. And in the north, far from this slow strangling of a kingdom by gold and silence, a different kind of winter is gathering its strength, unmarked on any ledger Tywin Lannister has ever read. Storm's End and Dragonstone. Stannis, Renly, and a different grievance. On Dragonstone, the sea does not care about Lannisters. The waves beat the black stone in the same slow rhythm they have always known, but Stannis Baratheon stands at the parapet and feels something tilt beneath his feet. Not the island, the realm. A raven from King's Landing. A few tight lines in a careful hand. Robert has chosen a hand, not the friend who bled for him on the Trident. A Lannister, Tywin, or another lion wrapped in red and gold. It hardly matters. He has always understood slight. As a boy left at Storm's End while Robert played at court. As a man starved behind those same walls, while the Reach tried to grind him into bone and dust. As the brother given Dragonstone instead of Storm's End, a dead man's castle for a living heir. But this feels different. This is not neglect. This is betrayal. Robert knows what the Lannisters are. Stannis knows he knows. He was there when Tywin Lannister brought dead children wrapped in crimson cloaks to lay at a new king's feet. He remembers the quiet in the throne room, the way the blood pooled and did not spread. He remembers thinking, even then, that justice had been bartered for convenience. This is what happens when convenience becomes rule. Without a Stark in the capital, there is no hard northern voice at the council table to say no. No Ned to share the weight of suspicion, to frown at the ledgers, to listen when Stannis whispers that the royal children's faces do not match their fathers. Does he still see it as he did in canon? Does Jon Arryn still die reaching for the same secret, only to have it buried under Lannister gold with no Stark hand to follow the trail? Or does Stannis, more alone, bury his doubts deeper, another quiet wound he carries in silence? On Dragonstone, isolation hardens into certainty. The realm is rotten. The king is blind. Justice has been not merely delayed, but denied. When he thinks much later of a crown, it will not be out of hunger for glory, but out of this, the conviction that no one else will do what must be done, that no one else even wants to. In the south, Renly watches the same shift and smiles. In King's Landing, or perhaps already at Highgarden, he feels the Lannister presence like a bright, suffocating cloak over the court. Red, rich, heavy. Some men see a noose. Renly sees a stage. If the lions rule the day with fear and debt, why should he not rule the night with laughter and whispers? Why not become the charming alternative, the Baratheon who is not drunk, not dour, not dead inside? Or does it press him faster toward the Tyrells? Without Ned as a possible ally, without that solid northern counterweight, does Renly look to Margaery's smile and Loras's sword, and think, earlier than in canon, that a different king might be needed? If Lannister control tightens too quickly, does he move sooner, reaching for a crown while Robert still breathes? Or does the sheer weight of Lannister power delay him, teach him patience, make his eventual bid sharper, more calculated, less impulsive? He does not know why he feels the danger in his bones, in the way children know things they were never told. Perhaps it is the way courtiers' eyes slide toward Cersei before they answer the king. Perhaps it is the quiet closing of doors whenever gold is mentioned. Perhaps it is only winter coming slowly to the Baratheon line. What matters is this. The fracture between Robert's brothers no longer waits on Ned Stark's death, or on a letter from a dead hand naming bastards and treason. It begins here, with a choice of hand that tells them both what Robert truly values. Not justice, not duty, not blood. Comfort, coin, silence. By the time crowns are claimed, the real wound will be older than any war. It will be the slow corrosion of Robert's rule under Lannister stewardship, the quiet knowledge in two Baratheon hearts that their brother chose lions over them, and that the realm will pay the price. North of all this, another choice is waiting, cold as stone. Daenerys in the east, a dragon dreaming of a different Westeros. North of all this, another choice is waiting, cold as stone. But far to the east, across the narrow sea, another choice is being prepared in fire. Daenerys Targaryen rides through the red dust of the Dothraki Sea as a quiet shadow beside a mountain of a man. Sold to Khal Drogo, bound in gold and horsehair, and the language of a people she does not yet understand. She carries the last embers of House Targaryen in her thin frame, in her unsure hands, in the way she watches every horizon. She knows she is a princess of a dead house. She does not know what, exactly, she is meant to reclaim. The tales that reach Pentos, that drift through Illyrio's perfumed halls and Varys' little birds, are different in this world. The king across the water is still Robert Baratheon, still drunk, still loud, still bleeding from wounds that never healed. But more and more, the realm hears Lannister when it hears the Iron Throne. A lion's hand on the purse, a lion's shadow in the council chamber, a lion's quiet, patient voice in Robert's ear. And in the north, word comes of a Stark who refused, a warden of the north who looked at the crown and did not bow deeper when told to serve. The small folk hear one thing, the lords hear another, but everyone hears the crack. Old loyalties, once frozen solid like winter rivers, begin to shift beneath the ice. What does that do to a plan built on waiting for the right moment? What does it mean when the realm Illyrio has promised Daenerys is not one united under a tired stag, but one slowly wrapped in crimson and gold? This is what happens when a single quiet defiance in Winterfell sends ripples all the way to Meereen's future queen. Illyrio and Varys have always traded in fractures. Dead kings, broken vows, hungry heirs. A Lannister-dominated court could be a gift. Dispossessed Baratheon brothers. Dornish princes who remember Elia's blood. River lords who mutter that the gold of Casterly Rock weighs more than the king's own word. Would they whisper that a dragon might bind these wounds? Or would they count the cost of lions, feeling threatened on all sides, and decide that dragons should sleep a little longer? In this turning, does Daenerys land her invasion fleet before the lions and stags have finished tightening their alliance, meeting a single glittering wall of spears and coin? Or does she arrive to find a patchwork realm? A reach that smiles and calculates, a Stormlands that grieves its king's neglect, a north that watches from behind its cold rivers and colder oaths, ruled by Starks who remember what Targaryen fire did to their kin? She stands, sometimes, on the balcony of her borrowed manse in Pentos, the sea wind cold against her shaved scalp beneath the silver-gold hair. She stares west. She has always stared west. She does not know why. In the way children know things they were never told, she feels that the home she dreams of is changing even as she dreams it. This is that story. A girl with dragon's blood, looking toward a realm already fracturing, already hardening, perhaps already more ready, or far less ready, for dragons. Hook, does the War of the Five Kings still burn, or freeze? She stares west. The realm hardens. The question now is simple and terrible. If Ned Stark stays in the north, if he looks Robert in the eye in that quiet, windy courtyard, and says no, does the War of the Five Kings still burn? Or does it freeze into something worse? By now, the board is already different. Ned is in Winterfell, not in the Viper's Nest of King's Landing. The hand's chain lies elsewhere, heavy around a Lannister throat. Jon Arryn's questions about bastards and black hair are dead with him, and the secret of Joffrey's blood is left to rot in the dark, buried under gold and silence. The North has tasted, for the first time in centuries, the possibility of saying no to the Iron Throne and surviving it. That taste lingers. It does not wash away. This is what happens when the quiet insult at Winterfell is never smoothed over by friendship and shared wine in the south, when Robert rides away with his pride smarting and his Lannister queen whispering in his ear. The Stark-Baratheon bond that once held the realm together becomes a wound instead of a scar, a wound that does not heal, that everyone pretends not to see. So what catches first? Is there still a single spark strong enough to throw all 7 kingdoms into open flame? Or does everything move slower, colder, like water seeping into stone before the frost comes? Under Lannister management, Robert's death becomes its own kind of fuse. Does he die sooner, hunted by his own appetites, and gently encouraged toward the grave by those who profit from a weaker king? Does Cersei tighten his wine, loosen the boar's tusks, arrange the hunt with a careful, smiling hand? With a Lannister hand beside her, there is no northern watcher to question, no Ned to follow the trail of dead bastards back to the truth. When Robert falls, does anyone dare say the word usurper's brood out loud? Or does the lie simply become law? If Stannis moves, he moves in a darker room. No letter to Winterfell, no ally in the capital, only a cold claim, a colder god, and a fleet sailing toward a city where every gate is held by lions. Does Renly move first instead, seizing the moment with a crown of summer roses and 1,000 reach swords before his brother can even speak? Without Ned's execution to shock the realm, which brother finds the courage, or the desperation, to break the peace? Or does the North move at all? He has always been slow to anger, this country of snow and stone. But slights accumulate. Southern tax collectors press harder. Lannister gold buys northern timber and northern grain at southern prices. A raven from the wall speaks of dead men walking, and the king does not answer. How many ignored warnings, how many southern insults, before the quiet talk in the Winterfell Great Hall hardens into a declaration that the kings in the south are dead to them? Which is worse for the living? A sudden, bloody civil war that tears the realm apart quickly, or a lingering decay that leaves it hollow, its strength leached away when the White Walkers finally uncome with winter at their backs? He does not know why, but somewhere beyond the narrow sea, a girl with dragon's blood is still looking west toward this changing realm. In the next part, we follow the moment that truly decides the shape of this alternate war. Robert's death under Lannister eyes, the succession that follows, and the North's final choice, whether the War of Kings still burns as before, or whether it becomes something colder, quieter, and far more fatal when the dead begin to march. This is that story. Robert's last hunt, a death under different eyes. The king dies on a hunt. That does not change. What changes is who pours the wine, who watches him ride out, who waits to catch his last breath and turn it into law. This is what happens when there is no Stark in the capital, no quiet northern conscience standing between Robert Baratheon and the people who have always wanted his crown more than he ever did. The hunt begins as it always does. Too much wine, too much noise, the sound of hounds and horns rolling like distant thunder over the Kingswood. But under a Lannister hand, the excess is not an accident, not a careless indulgence. It is policy. Who dares take the cup from the king's hand when the hand himself is a Lannister? Who risks saying softly that winter comes faster for men who drink like they are already dead? The flagons are never empty. The squire who should be there with the boar spear is delayed or replaced or quietly instructed to hold back. A Kingsguard knight looks away at the wrong moment. A boar is driven toward Robert that should have been driven away. Is it murder? Is it simply negligence sharpened into a weapon? No one writes that part down. No one ever will. In the canon we know, Ned Stark stands at Robert's bedside, the room heavy with the smell of blood and crushed herbs, and turns a dying man's regret into a legal shield for a rightful heir. Here, the bed is the same, the wounds are the same, but the faces around it are different. No hand with a stone quiet honor. No northern lord who still remembers Robert as a laughing boy in the snow. Instead, there are Lannister meisters, Lannister scribes, Lannister men-at-arms. Cersei sits close enough to touch the king's hand, close enough that he can smell the wine on her breath when she leans in to hear his failing voice. If he tries to speak of a regent, who corrects his words? If he tries to name an heir, who decides what was truly said? He does not know why the room feels colder. He only knows that he is dying, and that the lions are very, very quiet. There is no will naming a protector for my rightful heir. There is no ambiguous phrase that a northern hand can twist towards Stannis. There is only what Cersei allows to exist. What Tywin will later confirm. What the scribes, in neat, obedient hands, record as unchallenged truth. Who controls the story of a king's death? In this version, the answer is simple. The queen who has waited for it, the father who understands that power is a tale everyone agrees to repeat, the family that has always turned secrets into weapons. Jon Arryn is dead. Ned Stark is far away. No one living in the Red Keep truly wants the truth. So Joffrey's accession is clean. Too clean. No contested regency, because the hand is already their creature. No letter naming Stannis, because no one wrote one. No public moment where a northern lord reads out words that do not quite match the queen's plans, and forces the court to hear the crack in the story. The bells toll in King's Landing. They toll for a king who died as he lived, hunting, drinking, bleeding. But they also toll for something quieter, something colder, the death of doubt. A boy with lion-shadowed eyes walks to the Iron Throne, light catching on golden hair, on sharpened metal, on a crown that no one dares question. The realm bows. The realm accepts, in the way children know things they were never told. Some small part of Westeros knows this is wrong, that a wound has opened in the order of the world. But there is no voice to name it. No Stark to stand in that hall and say, "This is not the king you think he is." And while the South celebrates its unbroken line of succession, while the bells still echo off red stone, something older is moving in the far north, beyond the wall, where no one is watching. What happens when a lie on the Iron Throne meets the dead in the snow? We follow that collision next. A crown for Joffrey. A tyrant unchecked, the South keeps celebrating. The bells keep ringing, as if noise alone can drown out the quiet truth that no Stark has set foot in the Red Keep. What does a crown look like when there is no northern eye to judge it, no dead promise of honor sitting at the king's right hand? It looks like this. Gold and crimson poured over King's Landing like fresh spilled blood. Lannister lions stitched on every banner, Lannister guards at every door, Lannister gold buying every cheer. On the steps of the Great Sept, a boy in a heavy circlet stands between his mother and his grandfather, and the realm calls him king. There are Tyrell flowers in the crowd, Stormland lords with painted stags, but no grey direwolf banner, no quiet man of stone watching from the shadows. The empty space where Ned Stark should be is a wound no one names. Joffrey feels that absence. He does not know why. He only knows that this day belongs to him, and to the lions who raised him. When he looks out over the sea of faces, what does he see? Not subjects, not people. He sees a mirror for his vanity, an audience for his cruelty, a threat to his crown, He has always been taught that fear is safer than love, and on this day there is no northern voice to tell him that fear rots thrones from within. So his worst impulses are not checked. They are polished. Cersei smiles when he snaps at a kneeling lord who stumbles over the oath. Tywin's gaze hardens, but he lets it pass, because the boy is the crown, and the crown is the Lannisters' shield. This is what happens when a child king learns that every cruelty will be explained away as royal prerogative, every paranoid whim dressed up in the language of security. A whisper becomes treason. A jest becomes an insult to the Iron Throne. The small folk feel it first. They always do. The gold cloaks grow harsher, quicker to draw steel, eager to prove their zeal to a boy who equates obedience with violence. A baker who shortens a loaf loses a hand, not a finger. A hedge knight who complains of unpaid service is beaten in the street, his dead eyes staring up at red stone. In the taverns, mothers teach their children not to look at the royal procession, not to shout, not to be noticed. The king becomes a distant, dangerous creature surrounded by lions, a story told in a lowered voice, like winter, like a secret illness. Does this make rebellion more likely or less? Stannis watches from Dragonstone, counting slights, counting sins, seeing not only bastardy, but open misrule. Renly, in Highgarden's warm halls, imagines a gentler crown on his own brow, a realm that smiles instead of flinches. Yet without Ned's public fall, without a Stark's blood spilled on the steps as a symbol, what do they rally around? A legal argument, a list of grievances, cold words instead of a hot wound. The Iron Throne itself changes in the telling. It has always been sharp. Here it feels poisoned. Every time Joffrey sits, every time he shifts his weight and feels the bite of forged blades, he learns the wrong lesson. He thinks the pain proves he is strong enough to endure it, that the blood it draws is a private test between him and the dead kings beneath him. He does not know that each cut is a debt. He does not know how far that blood will run when the steel finally turns on him. Because it will. It always does. A realm ruled by fear and vanity does not stay quiet. It waits. It remembers. And somewhere beyond the city's walls, men who have not yet raised their banners are already imagining a different king, a different future, a different fire to cleanse this rot. The question is not whether Joffrey's reign will break. The question is, what else will break with it? We follow that fracture next, as the first true cracks begin to show. The North watches. News of a Lion King in the snowbound hall, the first crack reaches Winterfell as a sound. Not of steel, not of war. The dry, frantic beating of wings against winter air. Ravens come black against the pale sky, one after another, until the rookery feels too small, too close, the stone perches crowded with restless bodies and restless eyes. Maester Luwin's hands move quickly, but his voice is quiet when he sends for Lord Stark. Quiet and a little unsteady. He does not know why. Ned climbs the tower with the same steps he has always used, the same measured pace that carried him through siege and rebellion. But the corridor feels longer, colder. When he breaks the first royal seal and sees Robert's name written in a hand that is not Robert's, something in him goes still, dead still. Robert Baratheon, first of his name, is dead. A hunting accident, the letters say. Wounds from a boar, deep and mortal, taken while the king drank and laughed under Lannister care. The words are neat. The words are clean. The truth beneath them is not. He reads it twice, 3 times. He has always trusted what was written in black and white, in oaths and decrees, and the careful script of maesters who serve the realm. But this feels like a lie pressed flat on parchment. This is what happens when a man who loved fighting more than ruling leaves his life in the hands of lions. Another scroll? Another seal? Joffrey Baratheon, proclaimed king, blessed by the faith, guarded by his mother's house. The boy on the Iron Throne is a lion in all but name, and the North is expected to bend the knee to a crown that already smells of Lannister gold and Lannister blood. In the Great Hall, the news passes from Ned's voice into the air, and from the air into every listening ear. Some men cross themselves before the new king's name. Some do not. Lord Serwyn speaks of caution, of distance, of sending words of fealty, and waiting to see which way the realm turns. Tallheart mutters that oaths were sworn to Robert, not to a boy raised in a den of lions. Glover's jaw works, silent, as if he is biting back words that would make rebellion sound too easy. Robb listens. At first. Then he does not only listen. He stands beside his father's chair, red wolf on his chest, voice rough with a grief he will not show in front of these men. Why should the North spill blood for a king it has never seen? Why should they trust a court that let Robert die like some drunk in a pit, far from the snows that would have kept him honest? His questions are not careful. They are young and hot, and the lords of the North hear their own buried anger waking in them. Later, when the hall is empty and the torches burn low, Ned goes where he always goes when the world shifts under his feet. The Godswood is quiet, the heart tree's red leaves whispering over still water. He kneels before the face carved in white stone and thinks of a black-haired boy laughing with a hammer in his hands, and of the dead king that boy became. What is an oath to a man who is gone? What is a promise to a crown that has changed its nature while pretending it has not? He weighs the words he swore to Robert against the faces of his children, against the hard, waiting North that knows winter better than it knows any southern king. He understands, in the way children know things they were never told, that the next choice may not be his alone. The North is watching. Robb is watching. And somewhere far to the south, a lion boy sits on a throne of swords, already casting a shadow that reaches all the way to this quiet, snow-bound hall. The crack has come. What happens when it widens? Cliff's edge. Will the North break away without bloodshed? The crack has come. What happens when it does not explode into open war, but widens slowly, quietly, like ice-splitting stone under the pressure of deep winter? On parchment, nothing changes. The North is bound by oaths, by ink and blood, and the memory of fire. The Starks bent the knee to Aegon's dragons. They swore again to Baratheon's steel. The direwolf beneath the crowned stag. That is what the realm sees when it looks at a painted map. But maps lie. Distance is its own rebellion. A month's ride from King's Landing to Winterfell. 2 in bad weather. How do you truly rule a land you almost never see? A people who know snow and dead forests better than they know your face. Ned knows this. He has always known the quiet power in simply not obeying. Not loudly, not with banners and trumpets, just not. A levy that arrives late, a tax that is counted differently, a raven that is read, considered, and set aside in the Godswood, while the heart tree watches and says nothing. This is what happens when a man like Ned Stark decides that loyalty will be measured in winters survived, not in southern wars fought. He begins with what seems small. Reduced taxes on northern small folk, argued as necessity after a hard season. Grain kept back in Winterfell's granaries. Timber and iron sent to the wall instead of the royal fleet. When the crown calls for men to die in the stepstones or the Dornish marches, the North sends fewer. Older men. Volunteers. Names no one in the capital will remember. Is that treason? Or is it prudence, spoken in a northern voice that has never quite learned to flatter? He draws another line in the snow. No more players in the capital's game. No sons fostered at court. No daughters promised to Lannisters or Tyrells. When the next hand is named, perhaps Tywin himself, perhaps some pliant reach lord, Ned sends polite replies, stiff and distant. He will answer questions about wildlings and winter. He will not answer questions about succession, about bastards, about who looks most like a king. Robb feels the shift before he understands it. In the way children know things they were never told, he senses that his father is pulling back from the south, drawing the north around them like a cloak. But Robb is young, and his blood runs hotter. The old tales of the kings in the north are not cautionary to him. They are a promise. Why remain half free when the north once ruled itself from Winterfell to the neck? Why whisper independence in ledgers and delayed ravens when you could shout it from the battlements? He does not know why the words king in the north taste right in his mouth when he says them alone in the training yard. He only knows they do. Far to the south, Tywin Lannister reads the same silences Ned is writing. Men like Tywin understand absence as clearly as insult. The north is paying less, marching less, speaking less. He weighs the cost of dragging lions through snow and pine against the advantage of leaving the direwolf leashed in name only. Why bleed half the realm to force obedience from a people who are quiet, distant, and, so far, useful? For now, he chooses patience. Better a cold ally than an open enemy, while he tightens his grip on the riverlands and crownlands, while he teaches the court that Lannister gold and Lannister justice are the only pillars that matter. So the map does not change. The stag still crowns the page. The direwolf still bows. But beneath the ink, the lines of loyalty have shifted like rivers under ice. The north looks north. The crown looks inward. The realm lives in a kind of cold war, waiting. What happens when true winter comes, and the wall sends ravens that demand more than polite delay? When the dead do not care about oaths or distances, or careful, quiet disobedience? When the ice finally breaks, which side of the crack will the north stand on? And who will pay the price if they choose too late? Pattern interrupt. A north that turns inward. A threat that comes from beyond. The crack runs farther than politics. While the north measures distances in oaths and marches and supply lines, something older is measuring in centuries, in winters, in the slow, patient advance of cold. Beyond the wall, no one cares who refused whose crown. Men in black still stand their watch. They still pace along ancient stone, still ring the bells, still send their ravens. But in this world, their words fall into a quieter north, a north turned inward, a north that believes it has finally won the right to be left alone. This is what happens when a realm mistakes silence for safety. Without Ned riding south, there is no boy on the road to look at the wall and feel that strange pull in his blood. No bastard listening to Master Aemon and hearing in the old man's voice a warning about dead things in the snow. Jon is still at Winterfell, and the Night's Watch is only a duty on a map, a relic at the edge of a map that no one reads. He has always thought of the wall as a story, as a child's tale about giants and blue-eyed shadows, something half-believed in the way children know things they were never told. Now, with councils full of grain counts and levy numbers, it is easy, too easy, to let that story fade into the background hum of a long, long peace. So when the first ravens come, they do not sound like omens. They sound like border troubles, wildlings gathering in greater numbers, a ranger gone missing, a report of strange tracks in fresh snow, of horses found with their eyes wide and their flesh unmarked, as if the life had been pulled out of them and left no wound at all. Is that a prophecy of winter, or only another hard year in the far-forgotten north? At Winterfell, Meisters speak of supply lines, not sorcery. Lords talk of raiding parties, not prophecy. A more isolationist north counts the cost of every spear and sack of grain, and asks quietly why they should bleed for a wall that has not truly been tested in living memory. Without Jon's raw, insistent belief pressing on Ned's conscience, who stands up in that hall and says, "We must do more"? What happens when the realm treats the Night's Watch as a dead order, guarding dead fears? The irony is almost cruel. The North pulls away from southern wars, from Lannister gold and Baratheon tempers, dreaming of a clean, hard peace under grey skies. It wins the right to be alone. And so, when the enemy that does not care about kings or hands or marriage pacts finally moves, the North may discover that it has no one left to call. This is that story. Every refusal, every delayed reply, every quiet insult to the Iron Throne is also a decision about the wall, about whether torches will be burning when the long night comes, or whether the last light goes out with no one watching. How many more ravens can be ignored before winter stops asking and simply arrives? Jon Snow's road. Later to the wall, closer to the truth. So what happens to the boy in the shadows when the North turns inward and the ravens go unanswered? What happens to Jon Snow when Ned Stark stays in Winterfell and the wall becomes a distant problem instead of an immediate escape? Jon does not take the black at once. He lingers. Days become weeks, then a winter-long feeling that never quite lifts. He has always felt half guest, half ghost in this hall of stone, but now the sense of not belonging sharpens, because Ned is here. Because there is no war in the south to blame for his distance, only the quiet weight of a secret that hangs between them like cold breath in the courtyard. He watches Ned more closely now. The way his uncle, his father, stops sometimes in the middle of a sentence, as if he has walked to the edge of a cliff only he can see. The way his voice tightens when Robert's name is spoken, or when ravens arrive from King's Landing with their broken seals and their smell of heat and distance. Jon knows, in the way children know things they were never told, that whatever is written there has something to do with him, with his blood. Catelyn's coldness does not soften with Ned home. It calcifies. When the royal insult passes and Winterfell remains unbent, she becomes more fiercely Stark, more fiercely protective of what is hers. The true-born children, the true-born claim. Jon feels her eyes like knives when he sits too near Robb, when he laughs with Bran, when Arya forgets and throws an arm around his shoulders in the yard. He does not know why it hurts more now. It always has, but this is different. The wound has a shape he cannot quite name. The tension grows in small ways. A visiting lord from White Harbour, drunk on wine and wounded pride over Ned's slight to the Iron Throne, jokes too loudly about bastards with dragon dreams. The hall goes still. Ned's hand tightens around his cup. Jon hears the word dragon and feels something coil in his chest, something that remembers heat in a place that has only ever known snow. Later, in the yard, Robb tries to laugh it off, tries to say it means nothing, that men speak foolishly when they are drunk and afraid. But when Jon presses, afraid of what? Afraid of whom? Robb hesitates. That hesitation is the crack. This is what happens when secrets live too long in stone halls. They begin to seep through the mortar. The breaking point comes like that. Not as a single blow, but as an argument that has been waiting years for its own name. Robb calls him brother and not brother in the same breath. Catelyn finds them, throws a word like weapon, bastard between them, and for a heartbeat Ned does nothing, says nothing. Jon sees the choice in his eyes and sees him turn away from it. So Jon chooses instead. The wall becomes not an escape from Winterfell, but an act of defiance, a way to define himself against the silence that made him. If he is to be no one's son, then let him be the Watcher's. If his blood is a danger, let him bury it in ice and duty. He rides north later, older by more than years. He carries with him half-heard names. Lyanna whispered once in the Godswood, Rhaegar caught in a muttered curse, dragons lurking at the edge of every unfinished sentence. He has not been told the truth, not fully, but he knows there is a shape to his life that is being hidden from him. Castle Black will meet a Jon Snow who trusts slowly, who watches every man's eyes when talk turns to kings and rebels, who leads not from blind loyalty, but from a hard-earned distance. When Mormont speaks of the realm, Jon will hear he more than one realm. When Sam stammers about meisters and secrets, Jon will listen harder than he should. And as he passes beyond the last hearth, beyond the last farm, and the last thin tree, Winterfell falls behind him, like a half-read book. Not a home. A story with missing pages. The snow swallows the sound of his horse's hooves. The wall rises ahead, dead and white and waiting. He thinks the questions in his blood will freeze here. He is wrong. The wall cannot answer them, but it will press them. It will force others to. Somewhere to the south, ravens still beat against closed windows. Somewhere in Winterfell, Ned Stark stands before a statue in the crypts and whispers to a dead sister about the son he has just sent into the dark. This is that story, the one where Jon rides north not to escape ignorance, but to carry it with him like a sword no one taught him how to draw. The wall, Castle Black, a watch without its Stark anchor. Castle Black is quieter than it should be. Not the heavy, listening quiet of a place on watch, but the thin quiet of a hall that has forgotten how many voices it once held. The yard is half empty. The stables smell of old straw and dead fires. The wall itself looms above them all, a cliff of blue-white stone that does not care how few men stand beneath it. In another life, war in the south drives broken men north, thieves fleeing nooses, minor lords hedging their bets, boys who watched their fathers die under strange banners and choose the black because there is nowhere else left. Here, with Ned Stark still in Winterfell and Robert still drinking himself toward an early grave in King's Landing, that tide never rises. No Riverland levee is shattered on the Green Fork. No northern host is broken at the Twins. There is no bloody harvest to send its husks to the wall. So the watch thins, quietly, relentlessly. This is what happens when a realm forgets its own border with the dark. Lord Commander Mormont walks the ramparts with a face like carved ice, counting torches, counting heads, counting the gaps between them. Alliser Thorne snaps and snarls in the yard, his voice cutting through the cold as he drills boys too young and men too soft, knowing half of them will never learn to hold a blade through winter's wind. Maester Aemon listens to ravens that do not come, fingers resting on the worn grain of the table, feeling the absence like a wound. They struggle not just for discipline, but for meaning. How do you ask men to die for stones no one in the south remembers? How many times can you repeat the old words before they sound hollow in your own mouth? When the small folk below the wall laugh at black cloaks, when lords treat the watch as a refuse heap for their problems, what holds the line together beyond habit and pride? Jon arrives later. That too changes everything. He finds different faces in the common hall, different hands on the practice swords. Gren is there, but Pip never came. A city boy without a war to ruin him never found his way north. Rast died in some tavern brawl in the Reach. In their place are greybeards and green boys from forgotten hill clans, men who know nothing of the south and care even less. He has always read people quickly. Now he reads a different book. The politics are smaller, pettier, and more dangerous for it. Fewer high-born volunteers means fewer shields against Thorne's cruelty. Fewer chances for Jon to prove himself by defending weaker brothers in ways that matter. He rises more slowly, his responsibilities coming not as a sudden burden, but as a long, grinding assumption. If no one else will do this, he must. Does the great ranging still happen when there are barely enough riders to man the Shadow Tower? Does Mormont dare ride beyond the wall when every saddle he empties cannot be filled? Without the pressure of a realm at war, without the sudden need to prove the Watch's value to kings and queens, the old bear hesitates. The ranging is delayed, then pared down, then reshaped into something smaller and more desperate. Fewer men ride, fewer ravens are loosed. Craster's Keep might be reached by a different path, or not at all. The first direct clash with the White Walkers may come later, with fewer witnesses, or it may come all at once, without warning, in the black of a single long night. Jon feels the wall's weakness, like a secret only he can hear. He does not know why the hairs on his neck rise when he walks the top of the ice, or why the dead forest beyond seems to lean closer each day. But he knows, in the way children know things they were never told, that this is a castle waiting to be tested. He can train. He can lead. He can bleed for every stone. But what if the realm never looks north? What if no banners answer when the Watch calls? What if the first true scream on the wind comes on a night when even Jon Snow, even Aegon Targaryen, is too late to change what climbs out of the dark? Somewhere beyond the wall, something moves. Somewhere in the haunted forest, blue eyes open for the first time in 100 generations and turn, slowly, toward the thinnest point in the world's armor. And at Castle Black, a single boy on a frozen walkway feels a cold that is not the wind and cannot yet name it. This is that story. The one where the wall is weaker, the Watch is smaller, and the dead are already walking while the living still argue about crowns. The first raven that reaches Winterfell will not carry a warning Jon expects. South in flames, north in embers. Alternate sparks of rebellion. The raven that reaches Winterfell does not speak of the dead. Not yet. It speaks of coin and grain and a king who will not be denied. In King's Landing, Robert's wounded pride becomes law. He will not ride north again. So he reaches instead for the one weapon he still understands, a Lannister hand with a freer rein. Tywin does not take the office himself, not at first. He sends gold. He sends men. He sends quiet instructions that harden like ice around the riverlands. In this world, the noose tightens earlier. New tariffs on river trade. New levies on tully harvests. New royal inspectors, who are, in truth, Lannister men with ink on their fingers and steel at their hips. At first, Lord Hoster pays. What is coin against peace? But each demand is larger. Each rider more arrogant. Each letter stamped with the lion, not the crown. How long before Edmure's temper snaps? How long before a Tully outrider vanishes near the Golden Tooth and does not return? This is what happens when you humiliate a king in front of the realm. The wound does not close, it spreads. The riverlands become the testing ground, the place where Lannister captains raid by mistake, where burned farms are written off as banditry, where small folk whisper that the lions are already at war, even if no banners have yet been called. Far to the south, in the green and perfumed air of the Reach, another wound is opening. Joffrey is still Joffrey. There is no Stark hand to say no, no northern voice of stone to stand between the boy and his cruelties. A beating in the yard, a dead servant in a well, a singer's tongue nailed to the gate. Small things, the court tells itself, but the Reach counts small things. The Tyrells watch, they listen, they remember. In the Stormlands, Renly watches too. He has always watched, from the edge of power, from the shadow of elder brothers. If the king is weak and the prince is mad, what then? If the lioness rules the court and the hand wears Lannister crimson, who will speak for the realm? Renly's answer is simple. Himself, with a rose at his side. Would Margaery's smile be any less useful here? Would Highgarden be any less eager to place a pleasant, pliable king on the throne instead of Cersei's vicious boy? The opportunity is still there. In some ways it is clearer. There is less northern honor in the way, less quiet disapproval, more space for a pretty rebellion dressed up as reform. And Stannis? Stannis is the same. He is always the same. He sits on Dragonstone with his ledgers and his fury, reading the lineages that Jon Arryn died for. The truth about Joffrey's blood does not vanish just because Ned Stark stayed home. The bastards still have black hair. The Baratheon line is still broken. Stannis still has the seven-pointed star, the law, and a claim that feels like a chain around his own throat. But he has even fewer friends. No Eddard Stark to lend the cause a northern gravity. No chance of a quiet alliance in the Godswood. When he moves almost alone. A legal fire, small and hard and pure, burning on a rock in the narrow sea. And in the north, the fire is colder, with no Stark head on a spike, no hand imprisoned, no daughters held as open hostages. What cause is there to ride south? Robb still hears the old stories. He still knows the oaths. But the choice is less clear. Why bleed northern blood for southern quarrels when winter is whispering at the door? So the north watches. It listens to ravens from River Run, from Storm's End, from Dragonstone. It weighs each plea against empty granaries and long dark nights. To quietly send grain to a rebel lord? To shelter a fugitive knight? To do nothing at all? Each non-decision is still a decision. The map is beginning to glow at the edges. A burned mill on the Red Fork. A secret council in a rose garden. A lonely lord on a black island tracing his claim in the margins of a holy book. Small fires, separate, uncoordinated. Not yet the single devouring blaze that will one day be called the War of the Five Kings. And beyond the wall, where no one is looking, another fire moves in the dark. Not red, not gold, not green, dead blue. He does not know why, but on a frozen walkway, a boy named Snow feels it coming. Hook, a realm unready. When the dead come for a divided world, the realm does not break all at once. It frays, quietly, in different places, for different reasons. By the time that dead blue fire beyond the wall begins to move in earnest, the living world is already coming apart. In King's Landing, a boy king with Lannister gold in his blood sits a throne his grandfather effectively rules. Every council meeting a performance to reassure the realm that the lion and the crown are not yet the same thing. In the north, Ned Stark has always kept his word, but he no longer pretends that Robert's word binds him. Oaths are honored in the letter, not in the heart. The Riverlands remember Jon Arryn. The Stormlands remember Robert before the wine and the wait. Both look at a Lannister-dominated court and feel the old wound of the rebellion reopen. They send their levies when commanded, but slower, thinner, with more eyes turned north, wondering if the Starks will one day be the first to say aloud what everyone already knows, in the way children know things they were never told. This peace is a lie. And at the edge of the world, the Night's Watch stands on a wall that is more stone than men. Rangers vanish. Ravens do not return. The wildlings are not raiding so much as running. No great lord rides to inspect the damage. No hand of the king drags the realm's attention north by force of will. A few black brothers send plea after plea to a capital that files their words beside tax disputes and grain shortages. What happens when the dead finally come for a world that is already dividing itself into pieces? When white shadows spill through a ruined gate and there is no single king, no trusted council, no shared story of survival to bind these pieces together? In canon, the War of the Five Kings is horror and waste, but it is also a brutal education. Robb, Stannis, Renly, Balon, Joffrey. 5 crowns, 5 armies, 5 wounds that teach the realm what real war costs. Out of that fire, unlikely alliances are forged, because there is no other choice. A wolf and a lion share a wall. A dragon queen lands in a land already burned, and learns to speak its language of loss. This is that story's dark gift, a crucible. Here, that crucible never quite forms. This is what happens when the wars stay small, local, unfinished. The North nurses its distance. The Stormlands and Riverlands nurse their resentment. The Reach and Dawn watch, calculating, waiting to see who stumbles first. So imagine it. A winter darker than memory, and a raven from the wall begging for aid. Does a wary North believe a crown that has treated every northern fear as treason? Or does it close its gates and say, "You did not listen when we warned you of the cold"? Imagine a king in King's Landing, raised on Lannister whispers, hearing tales of White Walkers and seeing only Stark ambition. How easy is it for a clever voice to say, "The North invents dead men to justify rebellion"? How long before the word winter itself becomes a seditious rumor? And what of the Dragon Queen? She does not cross a narrow sea to find one enemy wearing 5 crowns. She finds many smaller enemies, each convinced the others are the greater threat. A lion court that fears dragonfire more than the dark. A northern lord who has bled alone for so long he no longer trusts southern banners, even when they finally turn north. A watch that has already broken once, and may not have the strength to rise again. When the dead come, they do not care who once sat a chair of melted swords. They do not care whose sigil flew over which castle. The only question that matters is simple and terrible. Is there anyone left who can make these enemies stand together? Or has the realm spent its last unity on old rebellions and quiet insults, leaving only scattered fires for a night that wants to devour them all? The final steps of this story will follow that question to its end. Not just who reaches for the crown in this colder, quieter Westeros, but whether, when the snow finally stops falling, there is still a living hand left to wear it. Ned's final choice: honor, autonomy, and the old god's silence. The snow in the Godswood does not fall so much as settle, quiet, patient, as if it has all the time in the world to bury men and their choices. Ned Stark stands beneath the heart tree and feels older than the red leaves above him. His hair is more grey than brown now, his leg aches in the cold, and the scar along his side pulls when he breathes too deep. One word. He said it in this very wood years ago, when Robert asked, and the old gods watched. No. This is what happens when a man says no to a king, and lives long enough to see the echo. The North is safer. He knows that. The gold cloaks never marched through Winterfell's gates. No Lannister banners ever flew from its towers. No southern court ever turned his hall into a nest of whispers and knives. His sons train in the yard beneath familiar stone. His daughters grow with snow in their hair instead of ash. His family is more intact than in that other life he never lived. But at what cost? The realm beyond the neck has rotted quietly. Robert drank himself into an early grave with no Stark voice at his side, and in the vacuum the lions closed their jaws around the crown. A Lannister hand, Lannister gold in every decree, Lannister guards on every door, fewer open rebellions, fewer banners in the field, fewer rivers running red, more coins changing hands in shadowed rooms, more children disappearing into brothels and black cells. Less overtly bloody, he thinks, and somehow more dead. He has always measured duty in bodies and winters. How many must die now, so that more might live later? How cold will it be when the snows truly come? The raven came at dawn. Black wings, black eyes, a scrap of parchment that smelled of cold and old smoke. From the wall. from Jeor Mormont, whose hand shook just enough for Ned to see it in the cramped letters. Wildlings massing. Dead things in the woods that do not stay dead. Rangers lost. A plea not for coin or food, but for men. For steel. For the North to remember its first duty. At the same time, another raven. Another demand. The Queen's new hand, writing in the King's name, calls for northern spears to put down a rebellion in the Riverlands. Lord Tully's banners are in the field against the crown. The Iron Throne bleeds authority, and the lions want northern blood to seal the wound. 2 scrolls, 2 roads, 1 man. He turns them over in his hands beneath the heart tree, feels the wax seals like small, hard hearts. His vows to the Iron Throne pull him south. His vows to his people, to the old kings of winter buried in the crypts, pull him north. Robert's shade seems to stand at his shoulder, laughing, asking for one more ride, one more battle. But Robert is dead, and in his place are lions and ghosts. He does not know why the gods are so quiet. The face in the weirwood is only carved wood and red sap. Yet in the way children know things they were never told, Ned feels that silence as judgment. This is that story, the story of a man who once refused a king's offer, and now must answer a darker one. He straightens, the pain in his leg a familiar companion, and knows he will speak again for the North. Not to refuse this time, but to define. What is the North when winter comes? A vassal that marches where the crown points, or a wall of living stone that chooses its own wars? He turns from the heart tree, decision forming like ice in his blood, and walks toward the hall where his bannermen wait, unaware that whichever raven he answers first may decide which enemy they face last. Robb the Uncrowned, a wolf who never marches south. Robb Stark grows into Winterfell the way a tree grows into a wall. Not in a rush, not in a blaze of banners and trumpets and southern songs. In quiet seasons, in long winters, in the slow accumulation of decisions no bard ever bothers to remember. He is not a boy king lifted on shields. He is a lord who learns, day after day, what it means to hold stone and men and oaths together. He rides the Wolf's Wood with Ned in the grey light before dawn, listening more than he speaks. He sits in the great hall while his father hears disputes over sheep and stolen timber, and dead men found in the snow, and he watches how Ned's voice changes when the matter is blood, and when it is pride. This is what happens when a son is forged beside his father, instead of in the ashes he leaves behind. He has always wanted to be worthy of Winterfell. In this life, he is given the time to practice, to fail quietly, to be corrected. There is no sudden leap from boy to commander over the Green Fork, no desperate need to prove himself to bannermen who remember Brandon more than they know him. When he takes the high seat in his father's absence, it is first with Ned's hand still on the carved wood. Later, it is with the memory of that weight steadying his own. Without a war in the Riverlands, his bed is not one on a battlefield. There is no Talisa in a smoky tent, no Jane Westerling in a tower that smells of herbs and fear, no Frey insult that festers into a red wedding. Marriage comes as the North has always done it, slow, deliberate, tied to rivers and passes and old grudges, a Manderley girl with sea-green eyes perhaps, or a Karstark, pale as winter wheat. The match is a tool, not a wound. The twins remain a crossing, not a curse. Do they still whisper king in the North, when the ale flows and the fires burn low? Some do. Men who remember the old songs, men who watched Robert's crown tilt toward Lannister gold. In the way children know things they were never told, Robb feels it sometimes in the way they look at him, as if he wears an invisible circlet of ice and iron. But the words never ring out in a crowded hall, never catch like flame after Ned's head falls on southern stone. Without that public wound, the title is a secret thought, not a battle cry. Robb watches the south the way a hunter watches a distant fire. Useful light, dangerous heat. He knows the Iron Throne can drag the north into dead men's quarrels and leave their own dead unburied. So he counsels caution. Trade, yes. Honor, yes. But swords? Only when winter's wall of mountains and snow is truly threatened. Southern wars are noise. The cold, and what moves in it, is silence. He does not yet know what walks beyond the wall. He does not know why the old stories pull at him when he stands on Winterfell's battlements and looks north. But he is a leader being shaped for a different war, one of long nights and pale enemies that do not care whose banner flies over King's Landing. The question is simple and terrible. When that war finally comes, will the wolf who never marched south be ready to stand? Or will the north discover too late what kind of king they never crowned? Sansa and Arya, wolves who never become southern ghosts. He is not the only one the north keeps. While Jon stands on the battlements and looks north, there are two other wolves who never ride south at all. What happens to the girls who never see the Red Keep, who never walk its bright poisoned halls? What happens when their ghosts are forged in snow and stone instead of in southern heat? Sansa Stark grows up with Winterfell's voice in her ears, not King's Landing's. The songs she learns are older, harsher, full of dead kings in the snow, and brides who freeze beside their lords when the food runs thin. There are still scepters and stories of gallant knights. Of course there are, but the men she watches are Karstark riders with ice in their beards, grey-beards of the Watch with black cloaks stiff from old blood, her father's sworn swords who kneel in the godswood because the weirwood is watching. How long can a dream of golden armor survive in that cold? How long before she understands that in the north, chivalry is less about songs and more about who stands the wall in the last storm? She still embroiders. She still listens. But she watches too. She sees her mother count grain in a hard winter. She hears Maester Luwin speak quietly of ravens and oaths and the price of defiance when a king is insulted. This is what happens when a girl's ideals are tempered, not shattered. They bend. They do not break. Arya, in this world, never runs through the Red Keep's dark ways, never watches her father die before a screaming crowd. She does not build a list of names like a prayer. The wound is different, quieter. She is still wild in the yard, still muddy-kneed and wind-burnt, still chasing cats along the inner walls when she should be at her needlework. Ned Stark still sees Lyanna's shadow and flinches. But now he has time. Time to put a wooden sword in her hand and call in a hard-eyed northern master-at-arms who knows that sometimes the best way to keep a child safe is to teach her how to cut. Does she become a killer without that long road of dead men and burning inns? Or does she become something else? A scout? A ranger in all but name? A girl who knows every tower, every hidden way, every patch of thin ice within a day's ride of Winterfell. She has always learned with her body first and her mind after. In the way children know things they were never told, she knows the north is big enough to run in, but not big enough to escape. Their quarrels change, but they do not vanish. Sansa resents the mud on Arya's boots at supper, the way their father's eye lingers on the younger girl's stance with a blade. Arya hates the quiet judgment in Sansa's raised brow, the way her sister's words can cut sharper than any practiced sword. Yet without the southern court to pull them apart, there are long winters where they have no one but each other. When the snow come early and the roads close, who else will listen to Sansa's low songs by the hearth? Who else will sneak Arya down to the crypts with a stolen candle and a dare? Catelyn's patience frays differently. She loves Sansa's courtesy, leans on it, shapes it into something like her own southern-born steel. With Arya, she bargains and worries, and some nights simply yields. Ned watches both, and wonders which daughter the North will need. A lady to hold the hall, a wolf to run the dark. When the first hard tales drift down from the wall, rangers lost, blue-eyed dead things in the snow, these girls are not far away in a lion's den. They are here. Sansa listens to the reports in the great hall, hears the fear under the words, and begins to think in terms of harvests, of guest rights, of which bannermen will answer a call to arms when the enemy is not a Lannister, but something older. She learns to speak to proud men twice her age without flinching. She learns when to soften, when to harden, when to let silence do the work. Arya listens too, but with her hands. She slips away to the yard in the grey light before dawn, runs the walls until her lungs burn, rides out with the hunters and the small patrols that test the snowbound roads. She maps the land in her bones. She learns where a small, fast rider can vanish between the trees, where a group can hide from eyes in the sky. When the talk turns to White Walkers, she does not imagine them in far stories. She imagines them on the King's Road, in the Wolf's Wood, at the gates. This is that story. The one where, when the dead finally come south, the North's first line of defense is not a broken girl back from Bravos with a bag of faces, but a young woman who has never left, whose face the small folk already know. The one where the Lady of Winterfell is not a southern hostage learning to play the game in Lannister shadows, but a Stark who has watched the seasons turn from these same stones all her life. In the deep of one such winter, when the sky is a low lid of iron, and the ravens bring worse and worse news from Castle Black, you can see them together. Two figures on Winterfell's battlements, cloaks snapping in the wind. Sansa, her hair bound in the northern style, eyes on the road south where allies must come. Arya, boots on the parapet, gaze fixed on the dark line of trees to the north, where enemies already are. They have never fled into that world. They have never been its prisoners, its pawns, its ghosts. But as the cold deepens and the dead draw near, both sisters feel the same truth settle in their blood like ice. They did not ride out to meet the world. The world is riding to meet them. When it finally reaches these stones, what kind of wolves will it find waiting? Climactic convergence. Jon, Ned, and the truth that cannot stay, buried. The world is riding to meet them. It does not arrive with banners. It arrives as a raven. The bird comes black against a white sky, beating over stone walls rimed with early frost, its wings a harsh whisper of winter. Jon is in the yard when it lands, breath steaming, hands raw from the practice sword. He knows, in the way children know things they were never told, that this bird is for Ned Stark. He knows it carries bad news. He does not know why. That night the hall is too quiet. No music, no laughter, only the low murmur of men who have seen war and hear it again in the distance. Ned sends for Jon. Not to the Solar, to the God's Wood. He has always come here when the world felt too large, when Catelyn's eyes were a wound, when Robb's easy smile could not quite reach him, when the word bastard felt heavier than chainmail. Now the heart tree waits white and still, its red leaves dead and dripping like frozen blood. Ned stands beneath it, as if on trial. Between them, on the snow-dark ground, lies the open raven scroll. The words are simple. The meaning is not. The Night's Watch reports dead men walking. Villages empty. Rangers vanished. The old stories breathing again. You read it? Jon's voice is quiet. Ned nods once. And more. There are other letters. From the south. From King's Landing. He tastes the name like ash. The king is dying. The realm is cracking. The Lannisters coil tighter around the throne with every breath Robert loses. He looks at Jon then. Really looks, as if seeing not the boy, but the blood beneath the skin. This is what happens when winter and war arrive together. The question of who you are stops being a private wound and becomes a weapon, or a shield. "Why call me?" Jon asks. "I'm only—" "Do not." Ned's voice cuts through the cold. "You are not only anything." The words hang there, dangerous. If Robert dies with his cub on the throne and Tywin Lannister as hand, the North will stand alone. The Wall will stand alone. And you? He falters. Jon feels it. The secret pressing at the edges of Ned's honor like ice against stone. Lyanna's face in the crypt. Rhaegar's name never spoken. A promise made in blood and tears while a girl lay dying. "If the dead are truly walking," Jon says slowly, "does it matter whose son I am?" "It matters," Ned answers. Names still have power. Stark, Baratheon, Lannister. He swallows. Targaryen. The word is a ghost between them. There are lords who would follow such a name if it rose in the north. There are others who would burn the world to keep it buried. If the realm must unite against this darkness, who has the right to call it to war? The right, the claim, the noose. This is that story. Ned sees two futures, both edged with death. Keep the promise, keep the lie, and let the South devour itself while the North freezes. Break it, speak the truth, and paint a target on the boy he raised as a son. The boy who may be the realm's only bridge between dragon and direwolf. "You once told me," Jon says, "that when the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. How can the pack survive if it does not even know its own blood?" The words strike harder than any sword. Ned has always believed that honor meant bearing the wound himself, shielding the children from it. But what if that very shield is now a blade at their throats? What is an oath worth if it helps the dead win? Snow creaks under his boots as he steps closer. Jon can see every line in his face, every year since the Tower of Joy. "Tell me," Jon whispers. "Tell me who I am, and I will swear whatever you ask. I will go where you send me. I will stand where you cannot. But I cannot fight shadows with a lie." The heart tree watches. The wind holds its breath. Somewhere beyond these walls, a king coughs blood. A lion sharpens his claws, and pale blue eyes open in the dark. Ned Stark opens his mouth. What does he choose? The promise that defined his life, or the truth that might save it? A claim refused. Jon Snow walks away from everything. Ned chooses the truth. The word is small. The wound it opens is not. In the Godswood, with the red leaves whispering like dead tongues, Jon hears his life unmade. Rhaegar, Lyanna, Aegon Targaryen. The names fall like stones into deep water. They do not splash. They sink. At first there is nothing. Then there is anger. Anger at the years of being less than a son in this cold stone castle. Anger at every look from Catelyn that said bastard when her mouth stayed quiet. Anger that the man he has always called father let him bleed on this lie when the truth was carved on a bed of blood in some tower far to the south. He does not know why his hands are shaking. He only knows that the word bastard has been a chain, and now he sees the key that was hidden in Ned Stark's closed fist. Why? The question tears out of him more than it is spoken. Why let Robert call for Targaryen heads in this very hall while Lyanna's son stood at his side? Why let Jon swear himself small when his blood is anything but? Why build a life on silence and then expect him to be grateful for the secret? Ned's answer is simple, and it is terrible. Because Robert would have killed you. Because the realm would have torn you apart. Because Lyanna begged. This is what happens when a boy's whole world has been winter and stone, and suddenly someone opens a door onto dragonfire. He can feel the shape of the temptation even as he flinches from it. If this is true, what could he claim? The North, as Lyanna's son. The throne as Rhaegar's heir. How many would kneel? How many would die? Word does not stay quiet. It never does. In the way children know things they were never told, Robb begins to watch him differently. Master Lewin's voice goes softer on certain names. Howland Reed's men linger longer at Winterfell's fires. A Targaryen Stark. A living contradiction. Some would call it hope. Others, a knife at every king's throat. Ravens would fly if this truth ever crossed the walls. Tywin Lannister would count northern spears and southern dragons and see only threat. Robert, already humiliated by Ned's refusal in the south, would hear Aegon and remember a dead babe in a sack. How long before Crown and Lion both decided that one quiet boy in the snow was one boy too many? So what does Jon choose when every voice around him begins to whisper Crown? Does he ride south, demand the Iron Throne from a drunken usurper? Does he let northern lords press his claim as some clean answer to a dirty war? Or does he do something no one in Westeros expects? He walks away, not in petulance, in purpose. The wall has always called to him. Now he knows why. Not because he is less, because he is too much. Because his blood is a map to every war the realm has already fought and lost, and there is another war coming that does not care about sigils or surnames. White walkers, dead things that move, cold that thinks. He chooses the watch not as a refuge from Catelyn's eyes, but as a rejection of every hand reaching to dress him in a crown. He tells Ned, quiet but unbending, that he will not be used as a piece on Robert's board or Tywin's, that if his blood is dangerous, he will carry it where it can do the most good and the least harm. This is that story. The story where a boy learns he might be king, and answers by swearing himself to a ruined wall of black stone at the end of the world, where he trades the chance to rule the realm for the chance to save it. The night before he rides, they offer him choices. Stay and be hidden. Flee across the narrow sea. Wait and see which way the realm tilts. Every option tastes of fear. Only one tastes of duty. He goes to the Godswood one last time. The heart tree watches. The faces of the dead Starks do not speak, but in the rustle of leaves and the distant howl of a lone wolf, he hears the shape of his answer. You are not your name. You are what you stand against. At dawn, he rides north. No banners, no escort, only ghost at his side and the weight of a secret in his veins. Behind him lie thrones and feuds and the slow, poisonous games of men who think the world ends at the neck. Ahead of him, a wall of ice and the cold sky beyond it. He does not look back. Snow begins to fall, soft and relentless. It dusts his cloak, his hair, the dark fur at Ghost's neck. Each flake erases another line between Jon Snow and Aegon Targaryen, until he is only a figure moving into white, small against the vastness, but straight-backed. He has always felt alone. Now, for the first time, he understands that loneliness as freedom. He will fight for the living, not as a king, as a shield. And somewhere far to the south, men argue over crowns and titles and lines of blood, never noticing the quiet boy who turned his back on all of it and walked into the winter that is coming for them all. The realm's last stand, united late or not at all. What happens when the boy who turned his back on power walks back into a world that suddenly needs a king? What happens when winter is no longer a warning on an old man's lips, but a white line on the horizon that does not stop? By the time the dead truly come, the realm is already cracked. Robert is long gone, burned out by his own appetites. A Lannister sits the Iron Throne, maybe Joffrey, maybe Tommen, with Cersei's quiet hand on the armrest, maybe even Tywin, ruling through a pliant grandson. The details shift, but the feeling does not. The South is a nest of wounded pride and old debts, with no Stark hand in King's Landing to temper anything, no northern honor at the council table to say no. In the north, the banners are different, but the stone is the same. Winterfell stands beneath grey skies, held either by Robb as king in the north, or by a hard-faced warden who remembers Ned Stark's refusal as the first open act of northern independence. Jon returns to it not as a bastard, not as a king, but as the man who has seen the dead walk and has the scars to prove it. He has always hated the sound of arguing in halls. Now every council feels like a race against a storm only he can hear. Do they unite in time? Do proud lords who once whispered that the North should stand alone now bend the knee to a war they cannot see? Some do. Some never will. The Riverlands, bled by Lannister raids and abandoned by a southern crown that used them as a shield, may answer Robb's call more quickly, not for love of House Stark, but from sheer exhaustion. The Vale hesitates, its gates closed, its knights polished, and waiting for a war of men, while a war of the dead gathers above their clouds. When the long night finally breaks over the living, the battlefields feel familiar and wrong all at once. Winterfell, again, is a last redoubt, but with different banners snapping in the freezing wind. A dire wolf, a flayed man, a trout, perhaps even a lion forced north by necessity, arrayed not in tidy lines of fealty, but in a loose, mistrustful ring around Jon and Robb, who now share command in a way they never had to before. Who leads when survival is the only prize that matters? The question hangs between them like cold breath. Farther south, the Trident becomes a graveyard twice over. Once for Rhaegar. Once now for nameless thousands, as scattered northern outriders and broken southern levies try to hold a crossing against wights that do not tire. Jon looks at the river where his father died and feels the old story closing its circle. This is what happens when the same water must drink Targaryen blood and the black blood of the dead, and over all of it, sooner or later, comes fire. Daenerys does not cross a narrow sea into a stable kingdom this time. She finds rumors first. A northern king who will not call himself king. A bastard who is not a bastard. A realm where the crown's authority ends somewhere south of Moat Cailin, and where Lannister gold buys fewer and fewer swords as the nights grow longer. When her dragon's shadows finally fall over Westeros, what do they find? Allies in a Stark-led north that remembers Rhaegar as a thief of sisters, and also as the man whose blood runs in Jon's veins. Enemies in a Lannister south that sees only another Targaryen come to collect old debts, or only ruins, burned castles, dead fields, empty cities where the bells have fallen silent. He does not know why, but Jon dreams often of 3 fires in the snow, one black, one red, one pale blue, in the way children know things they were never told. He understands that none of them will be enough alone. The last stand of the living is not a single night, not a single wall. It is a series of choices made by men who once refused crowns and offers of power, now forced to decide who speaks with authority when the dead are at the gate. In one vision, Winterfell holds, barely, with a patchwork of houses answering Jon's quiet voice and Robb's open courage, Daenerys' dragons screaming against a sky full of icy shadows. In another, the north fractures, the crown clings to old games, and King's Landing learns too late that wildfire cannot warm a dead city. There is no neat map, no certain banner planted in the snow at the end. Only the echo of a decision made in a quiet hall years before, when a tired king asked his oldest friend for help, and Ned Stark said no. The wind that moves through the empty streets of King's Landing, the wind that howls over the broken towers of Winterfell, carries that word with it still. No. And somewhere beyond the wall, something that does not understand words at all keeps walking. Echoes of canon. What this AU reveals about Ned Stark. Ned Stark says no, and the word does not end. It bends. It takes on weight, like snow that has been falling quietly for hours, until you wake, and the whole world is changed. This is what happens when the man who was meant to die in the capital stays in the north instead, when the martyr never rides south to meet his scaffold. In canon, Ned the Hand walks into King's Landing, like a man walking into his own grave. His honor is a straight road in a crooked city. It leads him to the truth about Joffrey, to the steps of the great sept, to a headsman's sword. His legacy there is sharp and clean and public, a dead man's warning, a dead man's name whispered by daughters who watched him fall. Here, Ned the Warden never leaves the stone of Winterfell. His honor does not vanish. It sinks its roots deeper. It becomes a quieter thing, less theatrical and more ambiguous. What does it mean when the same rigid code is not tested by court intrigue, but by the slow grind of winter budgets, border disputes, and the knowledge that the king he refused is still bleeding the realm dry? What does it mean when no one in King's Landing ever sees him stand up to a Lannister, because he is not there at all? Refusing Robert's offer exposes a different Ned, not because he changes, but because the light falls on other scars. He has always been loyal to the north first, to the dead kings in the crypts, and the children running through his halls. He remembers a sister on a bed of blood, a war that burned half the realm, a friend who loved killing more than ruling. He does not know why the word no rises in his throat so easily this time, only that in the way children know things they were never told, Jon is watching him, listening for the shape of that refusal. In both timelines, the secret of Jon's birth is the stone at the center of Ned's life. In canon, that stone cracks under southern pressure. The lies he told to protect Lyanna's son become threads Littlefinger and Cersei can pull. The secret helps kill him. Here, the same secret shapes Jon, instead of Ned's downfall. A boy who knows his blood early, studies the wall, the walkers, the movements of the crown with deliberate care. The realm's readiness shifts in small, unseen ways. Supply trains sent north a year sooner. Ravens answered that would have been ignored. A bastard's questions about dragon glass that no one in the Red Keep ever hears. Ned remains a paradox, a man who comes from everything, a great house, a great war, a great rebellion, and who walks away from the center of power not once, but twice. When Robert called him to rebellion, he answered. When Robert calls him to rule, he turns aside. How many men win a throne by proxy and then refuse even its shadow? How many men know a secret that could remake the realm and choose again and again to keep it buried? This is that story. Not of a different Ned, but of the same man pressed against different edges. Change the road he walks, and his choices throw off new echoes, new wounds, new chances for salvation. The question is not who Ned Stark is. The question is what breaks first when winter truly comes. His silence, his honor, or his son? Echoes of the North. How one refusal reshapes a people. In the years after that refusal in the snow, the moment hardens into story. It is told in long halls and over low fires, in the quiet between storms. A king rode north, they say, and the north did not kneel as he expected. A lord looked his friend in the eye and said, no. What kind of man does that become in the mouths of his people? To some singers, Ned Stark is a quiet rebel, the man who would not bend his neck for southern gold or southern secrets. Their verses linger on the way his voice stayed steady, the way he chose stone and snow over silk and power. Others make him a prudent guardian, the lord who knew the realm was rotting and would not drag his house into the mire. And there are darker songs, too, whispered when the ale runs low. Songs that say he turned his back on the realm and left it to the wolves and lions both. This is what happens when one choice becomes a mirror. Every man in the north sees what he needs to see. From those tales, older words rise again. King in the north, King of winter. Titles that had gone half dead, buried like swords under the crypts, begin to surface in toasts and jests that do not feel like jests. When the great hall feels too loud, when ravens from the south bring only demands and new taxes, when southern lords write of tourneys while the snows creep lower, the north remembers it was once a country, not a province. It remembers it has always been alone. In that remembering, its politics change. The great houses press for a formal council in Winterfell. Manderley, Umber, Karstark, Reed, men and women whose blood knows the cold. They meet not just for war, but for grain, for roads, for watchtowers along the long frontier. The Night's Watch is no longer a distant order of black-clad strangers. It becomes a partner. Northern lords send food, timber, sometimes their own kin, not to hide them, but to bind them. And beyond the wall, quiet talks begin. A trading post at the edge of the haunted forest. A promise that not every free folk raid will be met with fire. He does not know why, but some young lord at Winterfell looks at the wildlings and sees neighbors, not monsters. Children grow up under these stories. Robb's sons hear that their grandfather once refused a king and kept his people safe while the capital tore itself apart. Sansa's daughters learn that the south is a place of silk and poison, a distant cautionary tale, not a dream. Arya's wild-eyed heirs slip through the wolfswood with wooden swords and listen to old men speak of Harrenhal and King's Landing, as if they were foreign cities across a narrow sea. In the way children know things they were never told, they learn that opportunity lies north, not south. This is that story of a north that leans into its own reflection. Colder, prouder, more alone. Its banners fly higher, its walls grow thicker, its godswood roots dig deeper into the frozen earth. When the first dead things walk out of the trees, when blue eyes open in the dark, it will not be a realm begging the Iron Throne for help. It will be a country that has been preparing, half-consciously, for a winter only it truly believes in. The question is no longer whether the North belongs to the Seven Kingdoms. The question is whether the Seven Kingdoms will be ready when the North stands between them and the night. Echoes of the South. A capital without its northern conscience. King's Landing does not feel the absence at first. How could it miss a man who never rode through its gates, never walked its red stone corridors with winter in his eyes? The capital turns, as it always does, on gossip, on gold, on the quiet weight of secrets pressed into the right hands at the right time. It does not know that something it needed has stayed in the north. In this story, the Red Keep never learns the shape of a Stark hand. The Tower of the Hand belongs to someone else. Not to a man who reads old ledgers by candlelight until his eyes burn. Not to a lord who asks too many questions about where the gold went and why the cells are full of the wrong men. This is what happens when the watchdog never leaves his own yard. The arguments echo differently. The scandals bloom in other rooms. There is no northern lord who dies for honor in the throne room. No broken man dragged from Baelor's sept, while the small folk whisper his name like a prayer and a warning. The baker's boys and the washerwomen never pass on that story of a quiet man who would not bend the knee to a lie. They talk instead of other deaths, other disgraces, all of them smaller, all of them safer for the powerful. Without Ned's slow, stubborn investigation, the rot is not cut at. It spreads. The books John Arryn bled over stay closed. The line of blonde hair and false Baratheon blood is never spoken aloud in the king's own halls. Why would anyone risk it? When the hand is a Lannister creature, or a man too frightened to be anything else, the court is never forced to look at its own reflection. The lie about the royal children does not crack. it calcifies. It becomes the stone everyone steps on without seeing. Cersei feels this first, or thinks she does. No hand stands across from her, saying in a flat northern voice that he knows what she is, what her children are. There is no moment of exposed terror, no confession in the godswood, no chance to see herself through the eyes of a man who still believes in right and wrong. Without that foil, her certainty hardens. If no one dares speak the secret, was it ever truly dangerous? Jaime, too, is unbent. He has always worn his golden armor like a shield against his own memory. In a world where no Stark hand calls him Kingslayer with that particular wounded contempt, there is one less stone thrown at his self-deception. One less chance to feel the cut of what he did to Aerys, and why. His guilt becomes a quiet, private thing, easier to drown in wine and Cersei's bed. Only Tyrion feels the lack in a way he cannot name. He does not know why the capital feels thinner, more dead, as if some necessary opposition never arrived. In canon, he trades words with a northern bastard in the yard, and meets a hand who will at least listen. Here, there is no such mirror. His wit has nothing honest to strike against. His growth bends inward, twisted around Lannister expectations, and his father's cold voice. Does the South raise its own figure of stark honesty to replace the man who stayed home? A Davos, perhaps, dragged upward from the docks? A Stannis, if the realm were ever desperate enough to stomach him? The truth is simpler and worse. No one with that kind of clarity is allowed near the levers of power for long. Those who speak too plainly end up exiled, bought, or dead. So the role Ned briefly played in another life remains empty here. A missing piece in the realm's moral puzzle, a space where a conscience might have stood and said, "No, this is wrong. This is that story. This is what happens when the South is left alone with its own reflection. And no one from the cold North ever comes to hold up a clearer mirror. The city goes on. The court laughs. The lies stand. And only when the dead begin to walk will anyone wonder what might have changed if a Stark had once walked these halls and called them to account. Recap: the night the North chose itself. So we come back to that night in Winterfell, to a king in furs and wine, to a quiet hall full of old banners and older ghosts, to a single word that should have been obedience and instead became defiance. Ned Stark looks at Robert Baratheon, hears the offer that in canon drags him south to his death, and says no. That is the wound. That is where history splits. Not on a battlefield, not at a wedding, but in a northern hall where winter has always had the last word. This is that story. From that refusal flows everything. A Lannister hand is raised in his place, gold where there should have been grey. Tywin, perhaps, with his cold, exacting silence. Or Jaime, with a smile that never reaches his eyes. Either way, the viper's nest is left to feed on itself, with no northern stone in its midst to weigh the scales. This is what happens when the South is left alone with its own reflection. Ned does not ride through the Lion Gate. He does not kneel in the throne room. He does not lose his head on Baelor's steps while his daughters scream. He keeps his head. He keeps his distance. And in keeping them, he lets other things slip from his grasp. What is the cost of refusing power when the realm is already bleeding and does not know it? In this Westeros, the North begins to turn inward, almost imperceptibly at first. A delayed levy here, a quiet argument over taxes there, a lord who looks to Winterfell instead of King's Landing for judgment. Robb grows into an uncrowned lord, not a boy king in a Riverland camp. His banners do not yet rise in open rebellion, but they learn, in the way children know things they were never told, that their first loyalty is north of the neck. Sansa and Arya remain northern wolves, not southern hostages. Sansa's dreams of golden lions fade against the hard lines of northern stone. Arya's restlessness runs along the Wolfswood instead of Flea Bottom's alleys. Bran's fall comes later, or not at all. The game that once reached into every Stark child's blood now finds the door barred. In King's Landing, Jon Arryn's questions about bastards and black hair still die with him, but there is no Stark to pick up the trail. The secret about Joffrey's parentage never explodes in the open. It festers instead, a dead thing at the heart of the crown, poisoning judgments no one understands. How many lives are spared by that silence? How many are lost because the lie stands unchallenged? Far away, Jon Snow keeps his watch beneath different stars. He may yet learn the truth of his name, but without a father dying for that secret in the capital, it comes slower, stranger, through other mouths. Daenerys sails toward a Westeros that has not torn itself apart in the same pattern, a realm held together by fear and habit instead of open war. Does that make it stronger, or more brittle when the dead finally walk? Through it all runs the same cold question. When a man like Ned Stark refuses the king's hand to protect his family, does he save them, or does he merely change the shape of their doom? He has always believed that honor is a shield. In this telling, we watch that belief tested not by a southern sword at his neck, but by the long winter creeping toward a realm too busy with its own secrets to look north. As we move into our final reflection, hold this in your mind. Not a battlefield, not a coronation, just a single word in a quiet hall. No. How many dead hang from that word? How many are spared? And if you were Lord of Winterfell, with a king at your table and the weight of your children's lives in your hands, what would you have said? Reflection. What if saying no is the bravest and most dangerous thing? Maybe you would have said yes. Maybe you tell yourself you would have been braver, or more dutiful, or less afraid of what happens when a king feels slighted. But the truth is quieter than that. The truth is, a man like Ned Stark saying no does not end the story. It changes the weather of it. Stories usually love the climb. A farm boy becomes a knight. A bastard becomes a king. A loyal friend becomes hand, and either saves the realm or dies trying, rewarded in memory, if not in life. This is what happens when most tales touch power. They bless the ascent or they punish it, but they almost always center the reaching hand. Ned's canon path fits that pattern and breaks it at the same time. He accepts the office, walks into King's Landing like a man walking into his own grave, and the story punishes him brutally for saying yes. Yet here, in this cold hall where he refuses, the danger does not dissolve. It only moves. He has always believed that staying in the north is safety. Stone walls, familiar snow, the dead kings of Winterfell lined up behind him like witnesses. And in one way, the paradox holds. By walking away from the center of the world, he probably lives longer. No Lannister blades in the throne room, no public confession, no head on a spike while his daughters scream. But what else dies in that choice? Without Ned in King's Landing, who questions Cersei's children? Who pulls at the loose thread of Joffrey's blood? Who stands between Robert's temper and the Lannisters' quiet hunger? This is that story, the one where the man who might have steadied the realm stays home, and the realm must learn to live without him. A broken capital grows more broken. A king's council tilts toward Lannister gold. Somewhere beyond the wall, the dead walk through the dark, and there is one fewer honest voice at court to say, "Remember the winter that is coming for us all." If that feels uncomfortably familiar, it should. How many people do you know who have stepped back from a system that was eating them alive? A hospital that runs on burnout. A school that runs on silence. A workplace that runs on secrets everyone knows and no one dares to name. They walk away to save themselves, to protect their children, to keep their own blood from turning to ice. They do not know why they feel guilty, only that they do. Because when you leave, you also leave a gap. Who covers that shift? Who takes that wound? Alternate histories are not about fixing these people, or sanding down their failures until they shine. They are about putting the same soul under a different sky and watching what refuses to change. Ned still chooses duty over glory. He still measures every decision against the quiet faces at his table. Only now, duty means saying no to the crown instead of yes. The weather shifts. The man remains. So picture it. Winterfell under snow, the yard muffled and pale, smoke rising in thin grey threads. The King's Road stretching south, empty of northern riders, wheel tracks already softening under fresh flakes. In the south, a lion's banner tightens its grip on a dying king. In the far north, something dead remembers how to move. And in the middle of it all, a single word still hangs in the air of a quiet hall. No. Sometimes the bravest word a person can say is also the one that leaves the most ghosts behind. But whose ghosts are those? And when winter finally comes, will they stay quiet? CTA. Choose the next what if in the Game of Thrones. So now that single word has been spoken, that quiet no dropped like a stone between two old friends, what do you think it truly breaks? In this turning of the tale, when the king rides south insulted and the wolf stays in his cold hall, does the realm end up better, worse, or just differently broken than the one you know? Look at the lines we have only traced in shadow, and tell us where you think they lead. Does Robert, smarting from the wound to his pride, finally do the hard thing and name Stannis his hand, letting duty and law sit beside him instead of a lion? Or does he flinch from his brother's hard voice and reach for the easy power of Lannister gold all the same? Which choice saves more lives? Which one kills them quieter? Or perhaps you see another road. This is what happens when a Stark refuses and then refuses to be small. Does Ned accept in name only and bring the full northern host south as his shield, turning King's Landing into a court that walks on ice, every decision made under the eyes of 1,000 spears? Or does he do the unthinkable and crown a king in the north, the very night he tells Robert no, breaking oaths and history in the same breath, while winter watches from beyond the wall? Tell us, in your own words, which of those doors you would have Robert walk through. Stannis named hand, Ned marching with the north at his back, or Ned closing his gates and raising a crown of grey stone and old memory. Which feels most true to these men, as you understand them? Which feels like the choice that would echo longest when the dead begin to move? And as you follow those echoes, whose altered path calls to you the loudest? Jon, who has always carried a secret like a second name in his blood. Robb, suddenly heir to a kingdom that might rise too soon. Sansa, left in the north, with her songs and her betrothal turned to ash. Cersei, deprived of her Stark enemy in the capital, and left alone with her own reflection. Daenerys, far away across the sea, feeling the world shift in the way children know things they were never told. Tell us which thread you would pull, and why. Leave your version of this broken realm in the comments. The most thoughtful, the most haunting, may become the bones of future episodes. This is that story, but it can also be yours. If you want more slow-burn, introspective winters like this, more quiet, atmospheric reimaginings, rather than quick fixes, like, subscribe, and share. The more voices we have, the more roads we can walk together before the long night falls. Final fade, the quiet power of one different choice. So we come back, at the end, to where it began, to a cold courtyard in Winterfell, to a king and a lord standing in the thin, pale light, breath white against the air, a single word caught between them like frost that has not yet decided whether to melt or bite. Robert's hand is on Ned's shoulder. The offer is there. Hand of the king. King's Landing. Power, duty, old promises wrapped in new chains. In canon, we know the word he chooses. Here, in this quiet, altered winter, the word is different. Here the north does not bend quite so easily. Here, Ned Stark refuses. What does one quiet refusal do to a realm built on noise and steel? What does one man's attempt to protect his children do to kings, to wars, to winters still waiting beyond the wall? This is what happens when a single decision, made in stone and snow, is allowed to echo instead of being swallowed by the story we already know. The music slows. We see Winterfell from above, its towers dark and stubborn against the dead white fields. No southern banners in the yard, no golden lion prowling the battlements. Somewhere in those halls, Jon Snow walks as he always has, a shadow at the edge of the firelight, not knowing that far away a Lannister hand is tightening his fingers around a different throne. We drift south. King's Landing glows against the sea, too bright, too hot. The Red Keep is the same, and not the same. No Stark eyes watching from the council table. No northern honor to slow the quiet poison in Cersei's voice, or the cold arithmetic in Tywin's blood. Does Jon Arryn's secret die in a closed room? Does Joffrey's crown sit heavier, or not heavy enough? The camera does not answer. It only lingers. Far to the north, the wall rises, blue and dead and waiting. Without Ned in the capital, who listens when the first wildling speaks of white shadows? Who believes the old stories when there is no Stark hand to insist that winter is not a tale but a sentence? He has always feared the wrong war, Robert said once. In this world, that fear may never be corrected. For a breath, we cross the sea. A dragon passes low over black water, just a shape against cloud and moon, its wings beating a rhythm older than any crown. Does it turn toward a realm where the north stands apart, where the Lannisters rule unchecked, where the game moves without its most stubborn player? Or does it not care at all? This is that story, and this is the promise. Each time, we will take one decision left in the margins, a no spoken instead of a yes, a step taken instead of refused, and follow its quiet, merciless logic, not to fix what is broken, not to save the dead, but to see the tale from a new, haunting angle, in the way children know things they were never told. Because in the Game of Thrones, even the quietest no can echo louder than 1,000 swords. Fade to black. Then, when the dark has settled like snow, if you want to walk another road, to test another wound in the story's skin, stay with us. There are more offers on more tables, more secrets waiting in the cold air between two people who do not yet know what they are deciding. Winter is long. We have time for more questions.